The cooking utensils available were just a saucepan, frying pan, and a small cutting board. The only seasonings were salt, pepper, and herbs. There were only a few types of seasonings, but the amount was decent, so I could use them up without worrying. As per Nanam's earlier instructions, I managed to secure some rib meat, thigh meat, liver and tendons. The liver goes bad easily, so I'll cook it all up tonight. First of all, I need to drain the liver of blood and remove the smell. Since there's no strainer available, I divided some small stones on the river shallows and placed the thinly cut slices of liver on them, exposing them to the water. I'll leave them like that for a bit. I went back from the river and found that Cleria had started a fire already. What a sensible young lady. The tendons were best when boiled well, but since there's no time for that, let's go with yakiniku instead. They would be too tough to chew if they were cut thickly, so I sliced them thinly instead. The main dish for tonight is vegetable stir-fry with rib and thigh meat. The vegetables I'll be using are mock potatoes. Potos and the stem vegetable from earlier. They were still covered in some soil, so I headed towards the river once more in order to wash them. Hey, there's something in the water. I threw my knife at it. Damn. A salmon-like fish broke the stone partition I made earlier to wash the liver and ate a good portion of the slices. There was only about half of it left. Well, I was actually thinking there was too much of it earlier, to be honest, and I kinda wanted something other than boar meat too. I pulled out my knife and pushed my finger inside the open wound. I'll have Cleria consume this thing as well. I cut this large salmon into 3 after washing the vegetables. This is nice. I had some hard bread stuffed inside the food bag, so let's make a thinly sliced salmon canape. The rest of it would be grilled with salt. It seemed to have quite a bit of fat, so it should be delicious. The appetizers are salmon canape, grilled liver slices, and tendon yakiniku. The main dishes would be salt-grilled salmon and stir-fried meat and veggies. It's quite a lot. There were only cooking pots and pans, but there were few serving plates, so let's prepare one dish first, eat it all up and serve the next dish afterward. First, let's prepare the salmon canapes. Cut the hard bread into slices and place the thinly cut salmon strips seasoned with salt and herbs on top of them. Then let's put them on the only available wooden serving plate. When I checked out the herb container, it seemed to be a mixture of different types and had a rather complex scent and flavor. Was this a type of versatile seasoning? Now that it's done, I encouraged Cleria to eat. Her gaze was fixed on the plate. Yeah, it's good. I actually wanted to add some cheese as well, but the salmon was quite rich in natural fat, so it's fine as is. The crispy texture of the bread also served as an accent, making it tastier. Cleria was eating up like a storm. It's good that she likes it. Next would be grilled liver. I seasoned them with salt, pepper, and herbs inside the saucepan. Since the slices had a gamey smell, I added more of the herbs to counteract it. I grilled them on the heated frying pan. Since the slices were thin, I only needed to grill both sides. If grilled too much, the slices will harden up and shrink, so you need to watch the timing. I also put it on the wooden plate after cooking it. I tried some together with Cleria. Yup, these are good too. A slight odor remains, but the rich taste of the liver spreads inside the mouth. The crucial point is how much you grill it after all. Cleria also ate this dish without reserve. Rather, this was a menu prepared for Cleria. So I did want her to eat a lot. I didn't use the herb mixture for the tendon yakiniku. If you ate meat dishes with the same flavor over and over, you'll quickly get bored of the taste. This stuff was also delicious after being thoroughly cooked. It's a bit tough, but that chewy and crisp texture offers a unique sensation inside the mouth. Cleria also ate it with gusto. She's been eating so much since earlier. Will she be able to finish eating all the dishes? I feel like she's eaten twice as much as me. The next one is the main dish, salt grilled salmon. I also flavored this with salt alone. Cleria still seemed raring to go, so I grilled some more portions. You need to pay attention to the grilling process here. I've already removed the scales, so I need to make sure the skin would taste great. First, grill the skin until it is lightly singed and gains a nice and crispy texture. Grilling it any more than necessary would ruin the dish. This should be enough. I really do prefer the skin more rather than the fish meat. Cleria seems to share my opinion and finished off her portion in a flash. The last dish is meat and vegetable stir-fry. I cut the potato-like poto into 2 portions each and the stem veggie into 7 pieces. I cooked the poto first. I added the thinly sliced rib meat and thigh meat next. I added the stem veggie cuts last since I wanted them to retain that crisp texture. I seasoned the dish with salt, pepper and a dash of herbs. It would be best to cook this dish quickly. I tried it immediately after it was done. Delicious. The first thing you'd taste was the rich meat juices of the rib meat. The thigh meat was also similarly delicious. But its main draw was the fresh and crisp texture of the stir-fried veggies. This was a dish that makes people think food with only meat on them just won't do. I made quite the amount of stir-fried meat and veggies, but we managed to finish it all anyway. Cleria seems to be quite satisfied. I see. So that's the case. Cleria's increased appetite was most likely the result of Nanam stimulating it so that it could obtain the necessary raw materials to regenerate her foot. It must have stimulated her a lot. Otherwise, her appetite was abnormal. What should I do? Of course, I could choose to stop Nanam from regenerating her limbs. But that would be a last resort. I can't possibly prepare this amount of food while traveling. We were just lucky today. And traveling long distances using a prosthetic was a tall order, to begin with. No matter how easy it was to walk with a prosthetic, it still poses some risk if used to walk for a long duration. If possible, I want to prioritize the regeneration process first. Considering all this, our next course of action is decided. Let's find a place near the river to serve as a base and stay there at least until Cleria's leg finishes regenerating. I also want to continue learning the local language. Well then, how do I tell Cleria about my plans? As soon as we started traveling, Lord Corinth began asking the names of various things. It was indeed inconvenient to communicate using only gestures. I also wanted to learn the language Lord Corinth was speaking myself. Lord Corinth then proceeded to grab some plants, and seemed to be examining each of them. He took a look at a wide variety of plants. He seemed to be looking for one suitable for eating. After some time, he pulled out some plants and collected them. Those are called poto. They are often served in meals as a side dish. I didn't know they were actually buried on the ground. Lord Corinth seemed to be 25 years old. He certainly looks younger than that though. When I attempted telling him my age as well, I felt troubled because I didn't have enough fingers. But Lord Corinth soon counted until 17 with his fingers, and I nodded to confirm. In truth, I would be reaching 17 half a year from now, and am still 16 years old. However, I wanted to seem as much of an adult as possible in front of Lord Corinth for some reason. Suddenly, a big boar appeared from within the mountain. Not good. It was not too large, but it was really agitated. A big boar in this state was quite dangerous. Lord Corinth stood in front in order to protect me, and the moment he unsheathed his sword, the enemy was easily felled with just 1/2. The moment the boar was defeated, 3 greyhounds appeared. This was truly bad. I could not serve as help at all as I am now. However, Lord Corinth easily defeated them as well. 2 of them even had their heads sent flying with just a slash each. I would never have believed a greyhound could be defeated in a single sword swing if I didn't witness it myself. He butchered the big boar in mere moments. And after recovering the meat, he started walking while looking as if nothing worthy of note had happened earlier. He dropped the bodies of the greyhounds straight down into the valley's depths, without even recovering their magic cores. But I guess he didn't think much of their magic cores, to begin with. Such high standards. When we managed to discover a river, Lord Corinth gestured for us to go down towards it. He might be looking for a place to stay the night. And dinner as well. My body felt a little strange since yesterday. I felt really hungry for some reason. It would not be an exaggeration to say I was totally famished. We managed to collect meat earlier, so tonight's dinner would definitely be meat. The food wrapped in a metallic sheet was also delicious, but its amount was too lacking. I looked at the recovered meat and found there were several types. I am really looking forward to eating them. Lord Corinth seemed to be a capable chef as well. He proceeded with cooking preparations with an expert air. What impressive skills! It would be good if I could also assist him somehow. Ah, that's right. I shall light a fire with magic. He cut up the black-colored meat and dipped the pieces on the river's waters. Was he trying to chill them? He then proceeded with cutting up the rest of the meat. His cutting techniques rivaled those of a professional chef's. Afterward, he headed towards the river waters once again, but suddenly threw his knife midway. Amazing. He just killed a large fish with that throw. I see. So the purpose of setting down the meat there earlier was in order to bait such a fish. He also cut up the fish in no time. It has been a while since I have eaten fish. Lord Corinth finally began cooking. He took out some bread, cut them into slices, and put some previously prepared fish meat on top of them. I was curious about how he would cook it further, but it seemed to be finished with just this. We would be eating fish raw. I finally willed myself to try one bite after seeing Lord Corinth enjoying his meal. Delicious. I didn't think raw fish could taste this delicious. I started eating wholeheartedly. All the dishes that were served afterward were absolutely excellent. It was embarrassing, but I seemed to have eaten more than Lord Corinth did. Lord Corinth seemed to want to tell me something after the meal. He pointed at my foot, then gestured that we should not proceed with traveling on the road again for now. It was something of the sort. Considering what happened yesterday, the condition of my leg truly wasn't that good. He was likely telling me that I needed some rest. When I asked how long it would take with some gestures, the answer he gave was about 15 to 20 days. I would not readily agree, if not for my present state. I wanted to reach Catania as soon as possible, but I also did not want to ruin my body any further. It would be counterproductive if I pushed myself and ended up being unable to walk once more. I had no choice but to endure for 20 days. I nodded in agreement. That's good. I managed to convince Cleria. Well then, there's still a bit more to go until evening, but there wasn't enough time to scout out the surrounding woods. Since there's a riffle nearby, all we could do right now was to take the opportunity for a quick bath. To be honest, I did a lot of physical work yesterday, so I sweated buckets and currently don't feel so good. I also wanted to wash my clothes and underwear. I gestured towards Cleria in order to let her know of my intentions. She turned beet red and gingerly nodded. Why'd she blush? Well, she's at that age, I guess. I walked towards the river shallows with my formal uniform and some cloth in place of a towel. It kinda sucks that I lost my spare work overalls yesterday. I started to take off my clothes and took a passing glance towards Cleria. She panicked and hurriedly turned away. Well, I don't really mind getting seen by a kid. I immersed myself in the water. Fu-tilde-h. That feels great. The water's about 120 centimeters deep. The river was flowing at a slow pace. I brought my head down on the water as well. It's a shame that I didn't have any shampoo or body soap with me. Does Cleria have some? I also took the opportunity to wash my uniform. My body temperature lowered after 5 minutes of soaking myself, so I decided to get out of the water. Cleria still had herself turned away. I wiped my body with some cloth and put on my underwear directly after squeezing the water out of it. I didn't have any spares, so it couldn't be helped. It should dry up soon anyway. I put my uniform on next. It kinda felt strange, because I've always been wearing work overalls for several days. Cleria sensed that I've come out from the river and turned around, only to gape at me absent-mindedly as soon as she saw me. She seemed to be quite surprised, because of the fact that I changed into an officer's uniform. This uniform's design was revamped 5 years ago, after going for 150 years without any revisions whatsoever. The Imperial military got unusually fired up about it and commissioned the current #1 fashion designer in the entire galaxy to improve the uniform's aesthetics. It turned out looking pretty cool. But anyway, would Cleria also take a bath as well? 2. Lord Corinth conveyed something surprising to me. He apparently wanted to bathe in the nearby river. To think he would do such a thing in front of a lady. I thought as such, but immediately reconsidered. This was not the royal capital, and Lord Corinth is a travel companion and not one of my subjects. He was free to take any actions he deemed necessary. Moreover, separating from each other in the current situation wasn't wise. There was a danger of encountering vicious monsters, such as greyhounds after all. Lord Corinth mostly likely disregarded his sense of shame in order to be able to protect me immediately in case of such an event. I am sorry to let Lord Corinth experience something so shameful, because of my weakness. He seems to have finally gotten out of the water. I was surprised to see Lord Corinth's present appearance. He wore a different set of clothes from the ones he had on before. Silver and gold trimmings were generously used to accentuate his current crisp, black clothing. It was a military uniform. It was, of course, a design I haven't seen before, but my intuition judged it to be so. What exquisite tailoring! I could even feel a sense of majesty. The quality of the fabric used was beyond me. Until recently, I had only vaguely felt that Lord Corinth was a part of the nobility. But, judging from his current appearance, it was possible that he was a high-ranking aristocrat, a marquis at the very least. No, it was also possible that he was a part of the royal lineage. This once again reminded me of how unfathomable Lord Corinth was. I had been thinking of doing so after seeing Lord Corinth bathing earlier, and finally decided to bathe myself. The last time I took a bath was 7 days ago, and my entire body was caked with dirt and dried blood. I conveyed my intentions to Lord Corinth. He reminded me to cry out, in case anything out of place happened. He then turned away. No, at least help me to remove my belts and armor first, please. I pointed out all 14 belts to Lord Corinth in order for him to remove them. I then had him take off my armor as well. I was wearing clothes properly under the armor, so it was fine. It seems Lord Corinth was really curious about my armor. I went to the waterside with a change of clothes. Lord Corinth had his back turned to me and was busy examining my armor. I took off my clothes and went into the water. It has been a long time since I properly cleansed myself. It felt great. I thoroughly washed my dirt-filled and blood-soaked body and hair. I then washed my used clothes next. I felt refreshed. It was the first time I had felt so happy while cleansing my body. I went out of the water and got dressed. Lord Corinth seems to have noticed I had gotten out of the river as well. But when he turned around and looked at me, he made a very surprised face. I hurriedly checked my appearance. I was wearing half pants designed for knights and a tunic. I do not think them strange. Why is Lord Corinth so surprised? 2. It seems Cleria also wanted to bathe. That's good. Cleria's body still had dried blood sticking all over it. She seemed to have tried removing some of it, but her face and hair still had some sticking on them. Oops, she seems to want me to help take off her armor. Oh, that's a lot of belts. Guess you really can't wear these alone. Her armor felt strangely light when I took them off. I already noticed it when I examined the protectors yesterday, but even her torso armor was quite light. Huh? Nanam was unable to analyze this thing. Eh? Ain't that kind of bad? This was Cleria's after all. Would a piece from the back of the armor work? I scraped a really small portion off and swallowed it. Ah, okay. So you can't give me any other details, huh? It looks like stainless steel, but it's unusually lightweight. I have no choice but to ask Cleria later. I cleaned the dirt off the armor pieces with a cloth. She seems to have finished bathing. When I turned around, I saw a whole different girl. From before. Eh? Cleria. She turned so beautiful to the point that I would have mistaken her for another person. Her brunette hair was vibrant and her skin was milky white. She had lovely and elegant features fit for Miss Galaxy. How did she change so much just from washing some dirt off? It was like a complete makeover, man. Women really were fearsome. It's already evening. It's time to sleep. I had Cleria lie down first, cleaned up after the meal, picked up some firewood, threw them inside the bonfire, and had Nanum take charge of guard duty. I woke up at dawn as always. There was still a lot of fish and boar meat left, so I grilled them all before they went bad. We'll have the rest for lunch. Cleria was attracted by the smell of grilled meat and fish and woke up as well. The menu is the same as yesterday's. I refrained from making raw canapés this time. Cleria's appetite was tremendous right from the morning, but there was enough grilled meat to go around, so I packed the rest into a bento for lunch. After cleaning up, I helped Cleria put her armor back on and set off once again. I wanted to look for a place suitable for a base camp upstream, in a direction away from the road. You really can't resist the benefits of being near a river. We walked for about 3 hours along the riverbank. Nanum suddenly announced. There was a wide space between two large rocks nearby. Rather than a cave, it was more of a gap made between two large rock walls. I cautiously entered inside. I had to bend low in order to squeeze myself in, but the interior was tall and wide enough for people to stand. It was about 5 by 5 meters by my estimate. Unfortunately, there was a 10-centimeter opening on top of the formation. If it rains, water would soak the place. But you could say it was convenient in the daytime, as well, because sunlight would seep in from the opening. There was also an area that would shield us from the rain further in, so we should be able to make do. It's pretty nice overall. Yep, it's great. If we put some obstacles near the entrance, it would serve as the perfect base. Was this place okay with Cleria? I gestured to ask, and she nodded in reply. In the meantime, let's stay here. If we encounter any problems, let's just look for another place. First, let's think of ways to block off the entrance. Well, the only options available would be stones or making a fence from wood. We left all our luggage inside and went out with only weapons in hand for some reckon. I found another riffle about 50 meters upstream that was perfect for bathing. There were also some fish swimming in the water. After looking around a bit, I haven't managed to find materials suitable for blocking the base entrance. Wait, there's a fallen tree with a large enough trunk about 150 meters ahead, near the riverbank. It doesn't look durable enough to be used for long, but I'll check it out anyway. When I observed closely, the tree really did have a fairly thick-looking trunk. It felt like this tree had stood in this area for a considerable amount of years before finally toppling over. Its thickness was just right, but its length was about 10 meters long. If I had a tool specialized in cutting trees on hand, it would have posed no problem. But I don't have such a thing with me. It even seems I would have a tough time even with an axe due to the thickness of the trunk. It would be too difficult and time-consuming with just a knife. A sword isn't exactly suitable either. I pulled out my sword anyway and tried hitting it with just the tip. When I did so, the blade ended up sinking halfway. Wow, this sword sure is sharp. I didn't even put in a lot of strength in that swing. I swung it down with a little more force next. This time, the sword blade got buried fully inside. It would be too inconvenient to do this repeatedly. If I swung it down with full force every time, there was a chance the sword would chip and break. Huh? This situation seemed kinda familiar. Come to think of it, there was a scenario similar to this one in the game. That RPG had a turtle monster that would rebound most attacks if you only hit it with plain sword slashes. It was a stage where either you defeated the monster first, or your sword gets broken in the battle. I remember I got a lot of swords broken in that particular stage. But if you master the control of ki, you would be able to pass the stage without your sword getting broken in the process. That's right. I remember now. There was a technique I learned in order to pass that stage. Corinth-style swordsmanship hidden technique, final blade. This was a special technique that would infuse ki from within the body to the blade of a sword in order to buff its attack and cutting power. Ah? That embarrassing name. Really man, what was I thinking back then, damn it? What's up with the whole ki thing anyway? The developers were having too much fun designing that game. I remember the days when I desperately tried to copy that skill from an NPC master, and managed to obtain it after countless rounds of trial and error. It felt kinda nostalgic, and made me want to try it out right now. I closed my eyes and took a stance with my sword. I sensed the life energy within my body, controlled its flow and guided it up to my arms, towards the sword blade. Just kidding. I was just kinda playing around. But when I opened my eyes once more, my sword released a blinding glow. Again with that stuff, huh? Did I really manage to activate Final Blade? I tried lightly slashing the trunk with my sword. The tree was easily cut up without offering any resistance whatsoever. Oi, oi. What the heck's up with this man? I stared intently at the glowing sword blade. Even Cleria should find this surprising. When I turned towards her, I found her ogling the tree trunk, and not my glowing sword. Huh? You're concerned about that? I asked Nanam. Yep, thought so. Well, I ended up cutting it anyway, so whatever. Let's make full use of it then. I rolled the log all the way over to our new base. When we arrived back, I tried to think of the best method to use the thing. Guess I'll just have to use some strength to move it aside whenever we go out. There wasn't any point to using it to block the entrance, if it could be moved away easily anyway. Its length was close to 1 meter, and it looked quite heavy. I had Cleria go in first and followed afterward while pulling the log to seal the entrance. I'm glad we managed to find something nearby. Cleria would have a hard time moving this thing. The thickness of the trunk fit the entrance nicely. The remaining gaps don't exceed 20 centimeters in width. Dangerous creatures would be unable to easily enter with this. When I turned towards Cleria to ask for her opinion, she nodded while seeming impressed. Okay. With this, security is set. Since it was about 10 in the morning already, I decided to have an early lunch. The food tasted all right, even when cold. After having lunch, we busied ourselves with getting the interior of the base in order. It was more or less ready after making a makeshift fireplace and clearing some stones away in order to create a sleeping area. We also collected some firewood. There was a lot of driftwood scattered around the riverbank, so it was a relatively easy task. Next would be securing food. I'll have Cleria take a rest. Should I take off her armor? I gestured my intentions and she agreed. I pointed towards the sleeping area, and she obediently laid down in response. It was great that she was being so cooperative. I took up my weapons and the bag used for food collection. I went out of the base and pushed the log back in. So the liver is categorized differently from meat, huh? Finding some veggies was up to luck. I just needed some plants as usual. I can always catch some fish later, so I decided to go into the woods for now. Because the trees and grasses weren't so dense, I navigated it quite easily. I started needing the unfamiliar plant life. Looks like it's mostly a bust. I managed to find a few potos sometimes, so I gathered them up. Oh, there's some familiar salad use leafy vegetables over there. These were quite rare, so I took quite a few. Oh, it's been a while. I found another type of vegetable growing next to the salad vegetables. Gotcha. It was a little bitter when eaten fresh. But it would taste better if you fry it. Alright. Now for some meat and fish. I resumed walking around the forest while kneading away. Something really was there. When I zoomed in, I found a huge bird perched on top of a tree 50 meters out. It kinda resembles a black-colored chicken. It was large enough to look out of place on top of a tree branch. Thinking I had to get this thing, I proceeded to pick up some stones suitable for throwing from the riverbank nearby. I slowly approached it until about 30 meters, and threw a stone at it with full force. Alright. I managed to hit it dead on. It fell down immediately. I caught it right away, and cut off its neck to drain the blood out of it. I got a response when I touched its blood, so I managed to successfully procure some meat with this. But this guy sure is big. About 1 meter long maybe. I took it away and brought it back to the riverbank with me. I need to catch some fish on the river afterward to clear today's quota. I even managed to find a new edible plant while I was on the way back to the base. It looked like your typical weed. I tried the leaves and found that they tasted bland. When I pulled it out, I found a bulb-like root. This is. I tried pinching it and smelled a familiar aroma. This thing smelled just like garlic. I just found a rare treasure. They were bunched up in a cluster of 5 stalks, so I collected them all at once. This was a really nice find. It was great, because we only had a few seasonings with us. I was able to return back after an hour. I didn't want Cleria to feel worried, so I returned to the base as soon as I could. She appeared a bit lonely at first, but greeted me back happily when she saw me. Nah, she might have cheered up after getting a look at the giant chicken I managed to bring back with me for dinner. Guess I'll prepare the bird first before the fish. I proceeded with trying out removing its feathers. There wasn't any particular area with fine feathers, so I was able to quickly dress it. When I opened up its stomach, I found a large-sized and strangely white-colored liver. Wait, isn't this the fabled white liver? Great. This is nice. It's my first time to try eating raw liver. Well, even if there are parasites on it, I have nanoms inside me, so it's fine. I actually wanted to grill the thigh meat along with the bones. But they were just too large, so I, unfortunately, had to debone them. Let's have the right half of the bird for dinner. I cut the chicken wings and drumettes into portions small enough to consume easily. It's a waste, but I had to pass on the breast meat and tenderloin. There were other parts that couldn't be eaten as well. I cut them into a suitable size to serve as fish bait. I cut the liver into thin strips and set it aside on the saucepan for the time being. I'll work on the fish next. I set up a sieve made of stones on the river water, just like yesterday, and divided it into two sections. The one near the riverbank would be used to drain the liver pieces of blood. The one opposite would be used to bait some fish. I placed the breast, tenderloin and innard pieces on it. Next, I moved a bit further away in order to set up an ambush. I moved about 15 meters away and hunkered down. Cleria also decided to squeeze beside me for some reason. Well, it's fine, I guess. After a few minutes, I heard some splashing sounds. Yeah. They are here. I carefully inched near the makeshift sieve and saw something splashing around energetically inside it. After confirming its figure, I threw my knife at it. Direct hit. With this, I've finally managed to clear today's quota. The fish we caught was as big as yesterday's. I immediately removed its scales and chopped it into 3 portions. It also appeared nice and fatty. Oh right. I have to collect the liver I immersed in the river water earlier. I washed all the other ingredients and brought all of them back to the base in order to start cooking. It's already evening by the time we got back. Cleria has also started a fire just like yesterday. She was really a sensible young lady. Today's menu was white liver sashimi and stir-fried chicken wings and drumettes with potos, veggies, and garlic. The main courses are salt-grilled salmon and chicken thigh meat seasoned with herbs. Let's make them immediately. First, I peeled off the skin from the mock garlic cloves I managed to get earlier and chopped them as finely as possible. I actually wanted to grate them, but there was no tool for that available, so I settled with mincing them. I placed the white liver pieces on the plate and put some minced garlic on top of them. When I gestured for Cleria to eat up, she remained spaced out, so I had to show her how to eat it properly. I used a fork to wrap the liver slice around the minced garlic and dipped them on the salt I placed on the side of the plate earlier. This stuff's delish. There's practically no gamey smell present. The umami flavor unique to white liver spreads around my mouth. It paired beautifully with the intense aroma and slightly spicy taste of raw garlic. Cleria was a bit taken aback after seeing me, but she eventually copied my earlier actions and tried eating a slice. The moment the slice entered her mouth, her eyes widened in surprise. Afterward, she ate up with incredible momentum once again. Hey, I can't lose to her. Both of us finished them all in a flash. Next is the garlic stir-fried chicken wings and drumettes with poto and wild veggies. Chicken wings and drumettes aren't usually used for stir-fried dishes, but I guess it's fine. First, I heated up the chicken skin I placed aside earlier on the frying pan. They started oozing with oil right away. I took out the fried skins from the pan when they became nice and crispy. Cleria seemed to want to try eating them as is, so I put a few pinches of salt on the plate once again and placed some fried skins on it afterward. Next, I fried the garlic I cut into chips a little away from the fire in order to slowly let their aroma seep into the oil. When the color of the chips turned dark brown, I removed them from the pan right away and set them aside. I fried the poto tubers next. After sufficiently heating them up, I put in the meat next. I cooked the wild vegetables last because I wanted to preserve their crisp texture. I put the garlic chips back in, finally completing the dish. Yup, it's delicious. The flavor of the garlic-infused chicken oil has seeped well inside the potos, making it really tasty. The unique texture of the chicken meat was also good. The vegetables were really suited for stir-frying as well. It was a really great dish. When I grilled the salmon with salt, a notice from Nanam requested to have Cleria eat as much of the skin as possible. Oh, man. The skin's my favorite part. Well, it's for Cleria's sake, so I had no choice but to do as requested. Man, it's delicious as usual. Last would be the grilled chicken thigh meat. It was cut into bite-sized pieces in advance and rubbed with salt, pepper, and plenty of herbs. I grilled them until the skin attained a crispy texture. Afterward, I grilled the other parts until they were sufficiently cooked and placed the pieces on top of a plate. I then wrapped it with the wide leaves of the salad vegetables and ate them by hand. Cleria was again surprised by my actions, but imitated me once more. It was, of course, delicious as heck. The chicken skin was nice and crispy, the meat overflowed with umami flavor, and rich juices with each bite, and the fresh vegetables wrapping them up created an exquisite harmony. Excellent. Cleria looks quite satisfied as well. I reserved the other half of the bird meat and the remaining fish meat for tomorrow's breakfast and lunch. 2. After we finished our meal, it's about time to learn the language. For the time being, I had Nanam update the language database with the knowledge we've collected thus far. A large amount of data was uploaded inside my head all at once, so I got assaulted by a feeling of dizziness. The update was handled directly by Nanam and involved brain and memory manipulation, much like the senior officer's education process. Knowledge is converted in a form that can be directly transferred to a person's brain, and can be immediately used the same way as knowledge obtained naturally through personal experience. One might think it was tempting to transfer as much knowledge as possible, but the human brain is not designed to store a vast amount of information. If one attempted to, there was a great risk of the person's consciousness collapsing. Only knowledge corresponding to the ones a person can gain with effort through learning can be uploaded, such as language, Imperial military ranks, and recipes. The total amount of information that can be updated was also limited. It was not possible to upload info greater than the amount a person can handle in his or her entire lifetime. I gestured to Cleria in order to make her continue teaching me about their language. After a few exchanges, it seems she finally understood my intentions. She talked to me in a deliberately slow and clear cadence in order to better facilitate my learning. As expected, I don't get anything she said at all. I'll just have Nanam upload it all later. The language learning session with Cleria lasted late into the night, illuminated by the bonfire. We've been going through the same routine for about 4 days now. Every morning, I asked Nanam to prepare a detailed objective list based on the nutritional intake needed by Cleria for the day. I finished fulfilling these objectives at about 2 to 3 p.m. every day, went back to base, cooked dishes, had dinner and proceeded with language learning. It kinda felt like a parent bird leaving the nest to find food for the chicks or something. It looks like Nanam wanted to check the current state of Cleria's foot today, and had requested a checkup. I conveyed my intention to check her foot to Cleria. She nodded pensively while sporting a look of conviction. I removed the prosthetic and unwrapped the bandages. The cross-section still looked like a stump, but the previously thin skin membrane has now thickened to a normal degree. The biggest difference was that a part of the leg has already been regenerated successfully. It previously went down to just until the mid-portion of the shin, but has now stretched to just above the ankle. About 10 centimeters have been restored. Cleria was visibly surprised when she saw the state of her foot. She seemed to want to say something, but stopped midway a couple of times, with her delicate lips opening and closing intermittently. It was quite an amusing reaction. She kept touching her partially restored foot in disbelief. Oh yeah, I did forget to explain to her about the whole regeneration thing. Oh well. She'll get it once her foot gets entirely restored anyway. The current prosthetic can no longer be used. If her ankle gets regenerated, she would no longer be able to remove her leg from the prosthetic's opening. I gestured to let her know that I was going to remake the prosthetic, and Cleria nodded absent-mindedly. She kept her gaze locked on her now restored shin. Is she okay? I managed to finish remodeling the prosthetic during the morning, because the materials have already been gathered and were readily available. The suspension was simply fixed to the foot using 4 belt straps. It was still possible to adjust its height a little. However, you could not walk long distances with it anymore since it wasn't as stable as before. When I equipped it to Cleria and had her try it out, it seems she would not have any trouble walking for the most part. Right then. Let's start fulfilling today's tasks. It was a bit late in the day, but I already have a grasp of the location of different vegetables and prey, so I'll manage somehow. Then, about 2 days later, I tried to go out in the morning, only to be stopped by Cleria. She seems to want to tell me about something. I was worried that the remade prosthetic was uncomfortable for her, but it turned out not to be the case. It was actually about her foot. Now, the bandages were unnecessary. When I checked it out, it seems to have regenerated up to a little below the ankle. She sat down with a thoughtful expression and pointed towards her foot, starting from where it was first cut off from to its current length. She seemed to want to confirm if I was truly restoring her foot. When I nodded in the affirmative, she freezes up. Let's give her some extra details then. The estimated points were immediately displayed by Nanum and highlighted in red. I raised my fingers one at a time and counted off, pointing out how much of her foot would be restored per day to Cleria. At the current rate, her foot should be completely restored within 8 days. Afterward, tears began to fall from Cleria's eyes, and she ended up crying a lot. She was wailing unreservedly. Geez. Come to think of it, if your cut-off foot suddenly began growing back all of a sudden without any prior explanation why, of course, you'd be anxious. I went and did something bad. I gently stroked her head in order to calm her down. Cleria was surprised by it and stopped crying. I explained through gestures that I'll fix up her arm as well, but it would take more time if she doesn't eat properly. She nodded happily. The amount of food Cleria ate that day was astonishing. I was lying down inside the base. Lord Corinth was currently out searching for food. It has been 3 days since we've come to this place. Is it really okay to leave things as they are? I couldn't help but think. That's because all I did was sleep around all day while Lord Corinth struggles to find food to eat. All of the meals Lord Corinth cooks are amazing delicacies, and I have no complaints about them whatsoever. Is my foot getting better? I had no idea, because it didn't feel painful at all. Today's meal was also excellent. The next morning, Lord Corinth asked me to show him my foot. It finally came. What if it's gotten worse? I wanted it to be otherwise if possible. I was astonished the moment I saw my foot. Was my leg actually recovering and growing in length? I was sure it was cut off from the middle of the shin. But now it has grown up until the area above the ankle. How can this possibly be? A foot can't just regrow itself like this. Has my head somehow turned strange? I wanted to ask Lord Corinth to confirm. What if I really was going crazy? What if I was only imagining things, and my leg was still cut off from the middle of the shin? I anxiously touched it. I could properly feel it with my hand. But if I truly turned crazy, then was this sense of touch also an imagined one? After that, Lord Corinth offered to remake my prosthetic. Why would he need to remake it? It did feel like it would be better for it to be remade, but I didn't pay this much attention. My head was preoccupied with a lot of other things. I spent the next couple of days constantly mulling over it. I heard that people who lost their limbs would sometimes experience a mental shock. Was I like that as well? It has grown again after these past days. There was an ankle that wasn't present until now. I can't stand it any longer. I had to confirm things with Lord Corinth. If I truly went crazy, then I'll ask for help on how to cure it. The next morning, I finally asked Lord Corinth before he went out for another hunt. I told him through gestures that my leg was growing back. See, it had already grown back this much. Lord Corinth simply nodded in confirmation. I couldn't understand. Legs don't just grow back like this. He then raised the fingers of one of his hands and counted off while pointing to my foot with another, starting from the tip up to points where there was nothing presently. Was he telling me how much my foot would grow back per day? Yes, this must be the case. Lord Corinth knew from the start. He must have healed me with an unknown method I am unable to understand. He stopped counting with his fingers after reaching the number 8. My foot would be restored in 8 days. Just 8 days. How utterly incredible. I did not go crazy. Thank goodness. I started crying before I noticed it. This is so great. I'm so happy. Lord Corinth suddenly stroked my head, just like how my dear brother did. I was so surprised. Afterward, Lord Corinth explained with gestures that he would heal my arm next after my foot recovers. He indicated the number of days and how much it would grow back, just like with my foot. It would heal in 8 days as well if I kept eating as I did. However, the recovery would slow down if I didn't eat as much. I'll eat a lot of Lord Corinth's tasty dishes. I can finish whatever amount if that's all it takes to restore my limbs. I shall eat away with my entire heart and soul. Humanity first encountered other human civilizations, apart from them 1,513 years before the establishment of the Galactic Empire. It occurred when a planetary survey ship from Adele, the third planet of the A support system, made its rounds exploring the distant Gaia star system. The crew of the ship from Adele was initially ecstatic after discovering a planet which could possibly support human life, but as the survey progressed, they discovered that the planet housed flora and fauna similar to the ones on their home planet, and was even home to life forms uncannily similar to them. They were shocked to discover another distinct human civilization that possessed a similar genetic structure to their own. As each civilization's exchange progressed, scientific evidence surfaced, which suggested that their two civilizations had evolved independently from each other. But why did they possess a similar genetic structure then? It was thought to be impossible for two life forms that have evolved independently from each other to possess identical genetic makeups. This led to various heated discussions on both planets, the most accepted theory being humanity not evolving independently, but was instead brought to a planet with an environment suitable for them to live on and was left there to develop on their own by an unknown third party. The theory admittedly had a lot of holes, but nothing apart from it could properly explain the perplexing situation of both civilizations. As the years passed and the investigations of the Adel authorities progressed, this third-party theory finally became official after it was found that the situation was exactly similar to the second and third human civilizations they managed to discover. There were a couple of instances where the encounters ended on a bitter note, but the exchanges between the various civilizations were generally peaceful as a whole. The scientific development of the other civilizations discovered by Adel was lower than their own, but the Adel government helped raise their level by providing various technologies, though not without cost, to the other planets. 1,023 years before the Empire was founded, the Adel government proposed to institute a Galactic alliance with the various planets housing the other human civilizations, which they had discovered. The condition for joining the alliance was limited to. The rules were quite loose and no particular objections were raised, so all of the other human planets ended up joining. Some time passed, and 33 years before the foundation of the Empire, the Galactic Alliance had already managed to discover 151 planets housing human civilizations, all throughout the galaxy. The positions of the various planets were not densely packed in a particular sector, but were instead evenly distributed. And in the same year, the Human Galactic Alliance entered into war and won against a human civilization sporting technology more advanced than Adel. The newly discovered civilization introduced itself as the Siang Imperium and immediately declared war on the Human Galactic Alliance. The gap in technology wasn't overwhelmingly large, but the Siang Imperium still enjoyed a major advantage due to being 2 to 3 steps ahead in the tech development race. The Adel government, which was considered the de facto leader of the alliance, called for a gathering of all alliance forces and planned to counter the tech gap with overwhelming numbers. But the Human Galactic Alliance's rules were too loose and ineffective to practically implement. Each member planet chose to protect their native star systems instead. As a result, the planned countermeasure of the Adel government fell through, and one system after another got occupied by the Imperium. But 10 years before the Galactic Empire's founding, the Adel Starfleet was able to obtain a variety of critical information, including the coordinates of the Siang Empire's home planet, from a Siang Imperium ship they had luckily managed to capture intact. According to the info, the Siang Imperium hasn't managed to discover other human civilizations apart from itself before encountering the Human Galactic Alliance. They didn't have that many active colonies either. In other words, once their main star system was destroyed, the state of the war could be reversed immediately. The Adel government spent several years organizing a fleet which could destroy the enemy's home system, and commenced assault operations. The strategy was simple yet utterly chilling: total planetary destruction instead of occupation. Planets were to be destroyed by Nova missiles. A direct hit by 1 or 2 Nova missiles would completely annihilate each planet on the enemy's home system. The Adel fleet first fired off thousands of Nova missiles, which would head to their designated targets at a pace close to the speed of light from a sector outside the enemy star system. They then launched a simultaneous assault soon afterwards. The Adele Starfleet managed to successfully destroy all the planets housed inside the enemy's home system using only missile attacks. The main Siang Imperium space fleet suffered catastrophic damage from the raid, and those who managed to survive were scattered all throughout the occupied human planets. Many human planets that were members of the Human Galactic Alliance felt utter terror from the ruthless operation initiated by the Adele government, which resulted in the genocide of billions of humans. In the first year marking the start of the Galactic Imperial calendar, the Adele government declared the destruction of the Siang Imperium and the abolishment of the Human Galactic Alliance. It then proclaimed the establishment of the Greater Human Galactic Empire. The rules binding the former Human Galactic Alliance being loose was because of considerations regarding the continued survival and development of the human race as a whole. On the other hand, the Greater Human Galactic Empire was primarily established by the human civilizations first discovered by the Adele government, which had been working closely with it during the war and the planets formerly occupied by the Siang Imperium, whose citizens were subjected to exceedingly harsh treatment. All the other human planets, which were formerly members of the now-defunct alliance, greatly feared the newly formed empire's technology and the merciless slaughter of the Siang Imperium, and were absorbed into the empire one by one. Eventually, all discovered human planets were fully incorporated into the Greater Human Galactic Empire. Ever since the successful establishment of the Galactic Empire, Adele treated all the member planets fairly and ruled for the sake of all humankind, so the empire developed greatly and prospered. The bond between member planets became even stronger after the advent of the bug threat. In the year 2248 of the Imperial calendar, the member planets increased to an impressive 276, with the number of planets which could support human life, including the colonies, exceeding 200. 2. Greater Human Galactic Empire Navy. Heavy cruisers Zapota Commander Ahim Ad was pleasantly surprised after receiving a certain report from Zapota. So, am I correct in concluding that we've actually discovered the 277th human civilization? A video was displayed to Ahim. In the said video, a young human woman was seen cooking food. It seemed to be a cooking show. Ahim was beyond overjoyed. He'd gone and done it. His ship discovered the planet home to the 277th human civilization. His name and his ship were sure to be immortalized in Empire history. This was a great discovery. A digital signal, you say? Just how many years has it been since the discovery of a planet housing a human civilization with this much technological development? He checked using his nanoms. 312 years. The Empire citizens would surely make a huge fuss. They made such a racket from the discovery of that planet with a primitive civilization 50 years ago after all. Start data collection procedures. Send a high-priority communique to the home country after 72 hours through the special high-speed channel. And be sure to indicate me as the one responsible for formal negotiations. I'll leave the exact contents to you. In this particular sector, sending out messages through the FTL method would take roughly a year for it to reach the Empire. Utilizing the specialized high-speed channel would be several months faster. Can the locals from that planet detect this ship? Good. Excellent work. Please proceed. I want to take this slowly but surely if possible. Drop all units and place them on stealth mode. I'll leave the landing points to you. Ahim then updated his personal log with the details regarding the discovery of a new human planet. 2. 5 years later, the Greater Human Galactic Empire announced the incorporation of the human planet Earth as a member planet. The Imperial citizens all rejoiced at the news of Earth's successful addition. Each expansion of the human domain would mean additional strength to repel the bug threat. And it had been over 300 years since the incorporation of a planet with such a developed civilization. The entertainment-starved Imperial citizens clamored for information regarding Earth. The Earth was treated as an imperial territory with limited autonomy. In order to lift the restrictions, it was necessary to meet several conditions brought forth by the Empire. These were the sufficient enhancement of technology to acceptable levels, reaching a certain ability to defend against the bug threat, sending a number of local citizens to serve in the Galactic Empire military relative to the planet's total population, and so on. In other words, Earth needed to actively participate in foreign exchange. The Empire usually treats the buying and selling of certain types of cultural information, tourism and trade as types of foreign exchange. Even though humanity had the same genetic structure, and lived in similar environmental conditions, the process of development for each particular civilization was very different, and from that arises a unique way of thinking and culture. The imperial government secures this information, and then sells them to other interested human planets. This was especially the case with Earth, which housed a wide variety of races and cultures. The demand for tourist trips to Earth quickly ballooned to shocking levels, and the imperial government decided to implement a lottery system in response. The probability rates for successfully winning the lottery increased to over 2,000 times, and the price of buying and selling said tourist rights also increased accordingly. The price was roughly equal to 2 times the annual income of regular imperial citizens on a planetary scale. Of course, the only ones who could afford such a steep price for the tourist rights and travel fare to the frontier sector were a handful of major celebrities and the rich and famous. As a result, sightseeing on Earth has become a major proof of one's wealth and status. The general masses usually follow whatever those famous celebs get hooked on. Although the average citizens could go on a sightseeing tourist trip to Earth, they could at least get things like Earth-based ingredients and cooking recipes. The Empire imposed harsh tariffs on these things, resulting in the accumulation of foreign currency on the planet. After enough information spreads, it eventually leads to the public demanding more regarding the Earth. Thus, whatever fads were currently trending on Earth ended up trending in the entire Empire as well, and the planet established itself as the origin of all things hip and cool. 9 days have gone by since we've made ourselves at home in our makeshift base. Cleria's foot has nearly recovered fully, and she could more or less walk on her own by dragging her injured foot on the ground. Cleria's mood has visibly improved ever since she found out that her limbs would recover. I should have properly explained it to her earlier. When I asked her whether she'd prefer setting off again, as soon as her foot recovers, or waiting until her hand also gets regenerated, she picked the latter option. So it seems we're going to be staying at this base for a few more days. She looked a bit troubled about the fact that she's been doing nothing but resting at the base in the last few days, and asked me to give her a few pointers on swordsmanship. I went with teaching her some basic one-handed sword combos. I didn't know jack squat about proper swordsmanship after all. Food procurement's also going rather swimmingly. I've become more proficient in hunting wild game and foraging for food items compared to a few days ago, and I usually manage to come back before noon. Cleria then taught me her language whenever we had free time. I've also progressed in learning the local language, and it's become possible to have simple conversations with her using short phrases. I updated the language database quite often after all. Today, I also finished food hunting quite early and am now about to go back to the base. The prey I managed to catch was a small-sized big boar, which looked to be about 30 kilos. It seemed a bit troublesome to butcher it in the middle of the mountains, so I drained its blood and carried the whole carcass back. Cleria seems to have gone out of the base to gather firewood near the riverside. I'd rather have her rest up inside the base though. When she noticed me coming back, Cleria cheerfully approached to greet me while dragging her foot. The prosthetic was covered with the damaged boot that had been chewed ragged by a greyhound. "Welcome back, Mr. Corinth." "I'm back, Cleria." "Man. Having someone to welcome you back after a hard day's work really feels great." However, it's still hard to say whether or not the proper meaning of the words we're using to speak to each other is being conveyed correctly, because there are still insufficient samples. This is because I've been relying solely on what Nanum's currently translated through deductive analysis. For example, might actually mean or something like that. I've only ever heard her say these words whenever I brought back some prey after all. Well, based on Cleria's attitude, it seems likely that she's been calling me with some sort of honorific attached, so the translation, Mr., is likely an accurate approximation. I think she's using it 'cause I'm a bit older than her, but I'd prefer it if she called me by name instead. I didn't really dig the whole polite address thing. It sounded a bit too distant and stiff. "Cleria, it's Alan." "Not." "Okay." Cleria froze up a bit for some reason. She then blushed red and called me Alan in an embarrassed tone. I proceeded to butcher the big boar at the river's edge. Cleria watched me intently. She seemed to be trying to learn the butchering methods by observing my work. Or maybe she was just really looking forward to dinner. Cleria's appetite's been nothing short of monstrous. The Nanums may have been helping her with digesting all that food, but I still think it would be better if she toned it down a bit to avoid the possibility of an upset tummy. All right, butchering's done. Let's have some lunch. When I went back inside the base to start cooking, I noticed that the bonfire's gone out. Now that I think about it, Cleria's always managed to keep lighting a fire on her own. How exactly does she do it? Does she have some sort of tool? Cleria's also noticed that the fire's gone out and proceeded to put in some new firewood on top of the makeshift fireplace. While I was looking on curiously, she suddenly closed her eyes and turned her open palm towards the woodpile. After about 10 seconds, she opened her eyes and uttered "fire." A jet of flame was then released 20 centimeters away from her open palm. Really? But seriously, what was that? Cleria brought her hand back down, after releasing a jet of flame towards the fireplace like a flamethrower for about 10 seconds. The firewood blazed right up. "Cleria, what was that just now?" Cleria gave me a puzzled stare. When she finally understood what I was asking about, she started explaining it to me while sporting a somewhat proud expression, but there were a lot of unfamiliar words, so I didn't really get most of what she was trying to say. Basically, She was proud of how short it took her to release the earlier jet of flame. I somehow got reminded of the superhero shows I watched in the Hollibit when I was a kid, where they would fight evil using all sorts of superpowers. But that was purely fiction. That really might be the case. Nanam's already detected that unknown energy signature a total 3 times. 2 of the instances were caused by Cleria, and 1 was caused by me when I suddenly made my sword glow. When my sword lit up, Cleria didn't really mind it and acted surprised about how effortlessly I cut the log instead. In other words, it seemed that glowing swords weren't exactly all that uncommon. If Cleria was truly an Esper, then I suppose I'd become one too, cause I made my sword glow and all. Did I somehow develop some sort of superpower when I landed on this planet? I don't really feel any different though. One possible hypothesis available. The sensor's response is similar to the unknown energy readings first recorded on planet Salza 2 of the Elida star system. Elida star system. I think I've heard of it from somewhere. Oh yeah. I actually learned about it in the Galactic Military Academy. It was famously known as a naturally human habitable planet that was discovered about 40 years ago. Planets that can support human life naturally without the use of terraforming were quite rare after all. There was an unknown energy form discovered when a researcher was attacked by an indigenous life form of that planet and got injured. A dog-like creature attacked the said researcher from a distance of more than 10 meters, sporting unprecedented speed that was literally instantaneous. After the incident, the creature was successfully captured and studied, but it was later found that its physical structure could not possibly support such absurd acceleration. Subsequent research revealed that the creature somehow enhanced its physical abilities through the use of some form of energy. That's about all I knew about the incident. If the people on this planet can truly use such abilities freely, then it would be a bit troublesome. I previously thought we'd be able to pull through even if the people chasing after Cleria were to catch up to us somehow, as long as I had my trusty rifle. But this new variable complicates things. These abilities seemed potentially dangerous. It shouldn't be limited to releasing flames either. There might possibly be more. Cleria uttered fire before using her ability earlier. If she could only create flames, then it wouldn't make sense for her to label it specifically like that. I think she did so in order to distinguish it from her other abilities. Well, it's all theories in the end. If I want to know for sure, I'd have to ask Cleria directly. However, I needed to expand my current vocabulary more in order to do that. Looks like I need to work harder to learn the local language. I suddenly noticed Cleria worriedly staring at me. Oops. I spaced out a bit there. Let's have lunch then. 2. Cleria's foot has finally been fully restored after 14 days. Cleria thanked me in tears after I handed back her greave, which I hadn't thrown away. The newly regenerated foot wasn't in the best condition and was in need of some rehabilitation, which was facilitated by Nanam. I joined Cleria for a walk near the river's edge as a form of rehab activity. Since language learning has progressed enough, we were finally able to have a decent conversation with each other. I finally asked about the thing that was bugging me for the past days as we continued our walk. Hey Cleria, can you do other stuff apart from the thing you used to light up the bonfire last time? Oh, You mean asterisk 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 asterisk. Nanum immediately translated and updated the database. The resulting translation for the word was magic. Yeah, that. Can you use other magic? Yes, of course, Cleria replied while seemingly surprised at my sudden question. Can you show me? Cleria paused a little, but eventually faced the river and raised her hand forward with eyes closed. After about 15 seconds, she opened her eyes and said, "Fireball." Approximately 20 centimeters away from her palm, a ball of flame with a size less than 30 centimeters appeared and flew towards the river. It was about as fast as a stone that was hurled forward. It hit the river water and promptly got extinguished. Whoa, cool. The speed was unexpectedly slow though, but it somehow felt fresh. It would be scary if one of these flew at you. I looked at Cleria encouragingly, with a gaze filled with anticipation to see other types of magic. She put her hand forward again, and after 30 seconds uttered out flame arrow. This time, 3 flaming arrows appeared at the tip of her palm and flew towards the river. They were noticeably faster than the fireball earlier, and flew at a speed comparable to real arrows, hitting the river and making a loud noise. Whoa! That's amazing too. Seems like a higher class of magic compared to fireball. Seems pretty simple enough. Are there any more? Cleria didn't disappoint and pointed her palm towards the shore this time. Is it a spell only usable on land? After 30 seconds, she opened her eyes and uttered firewall. A raging wall of flames appeared about 5 meters ahead of her. The height was less than 2 meters and the width was about 5 meters. Whoa! That's impressive. It was probably used to serve as an obstruction to one's opponents during battle. But it seemed to pose more of a burden on the caster. Cleria brought her hand back down after a few moments, and the flame wall disappeared. That's all the fire magic I can use, Cleria stated. So that's her fire magic, huh? As I thought, there are other types as well. What other types of magic can you use? She paused once more and held her hand out towards the river. After 10 seconds, she opened her eyes and said, "Water." Water gushed out from Cleria's palm, and only stopped when she brought it down. Wow, ain't this like creating matter from nothing? How amazing. Cleria seemed a bit embarrassed after her display of the last spell. That's the only water magic I can cast. So she's good at fire magic, but not as proficient in water magic. She's still impressive enough though. Is the water drinkable? Yes, of course, you can. Cleria made a bewildered expression and answered. In other words, as long as I had Cleria with me, drinking water won't be a problem anymore. That's seriously great news. Magic's really convenient. The sensor I commissioned Nanum to make 5 days ago was now complete. I wanna have a go at it. I mean, I did manage to make my sword glow and all. That's gotta mean I had some talent at least. A schematic showing the flow of magical energy inside the body was then displayed on a virtual window in front of me. I see. It kinda resembles the route I imagined when I accidentally activated Final Blade. Last time, I visualized the bioenergy inside my body and let it travel through my arms and inside the blade of the sword. It's the same principle here, huh? It seemed that there was no visible change in the energy inside the body until after they came out as fire or water. Did Cleria close her eyes in order to visualize what spell she wanted to use? She thought of an image of water or fire coming out so she could cast the spells. Is that how it is? Can you also use magic, Alan? Cleria still seemed embarrassed whenever she called me by name for some reason. Was my name equivalent to a word she found embarrassing to say in her language? I hope not. But Cleria's question came at the right time. I was totally itching to have a go. Instead of answering her, I pointed my palm in front, towards the river. I once again imagined my body's bioenergy being molded inside me. I then guided the energy through my outstretched arm, and released it through my open palm. I maintained an image of a ball of flames flying straight towards the river all throughout the process. Now, a fireball flew towards the river waters, just like Cleria's spell earlier, and disappeared when it hit the water. Hey, I did it. Was it really this easy? This is really fun, man. I can't really express the feeling in words, but it's totally different from shooting with a weapon. However, it takes too long to launch out. 10 seconds or so, right? I don't think this could be practically used in an actual fight. Great. You'll be responsible for the troublesome parts, while I concentrate solely on forming the image. A indicator appeared in a corner of a virtual display window. I'm really pumped. I can't exactly describe it, but it kinda felt like energy was welling up inside me or something. I pointed my palm forward and imagined a fireball. Fire. A fireball flew out towards the river once more. Great, I did it. All right. A indicator then appeared on the virtual window. Good going, Nanam. I imagined launching fireballs in rapid succession. Fire, fire, fire. 3 fireballs flew out of my palm and hit the river water. Now I'll just have to work on the power output. Let's try changing the image. The popped up once again. I imagined the standard issue grenade we were supplied within the military. Fire grenade. I tried launching 3 at once, but only 1 shot was fired. It landed on the river and exploded. Water was launched up into the air due to the explosion and dropped back down towards me and Cleria, making us totally soaked. Oh, boy. I went and did it now. I got a bit too carried away. Looks like magic's really something very dangerous. I have to be more careful from now on. Cleria just stood still, seemingly petrified. The indicator was gone. So 1 fire grenade needed 3 fireballs worth of energy, huh? Looks like I have to experiment a bit and collect more data. There would be a danger of an unforeseen accident occurring otherwise. Let's research carefully then. Anyway, the experiment was a success. What great results! Afterward, Cleria finally snapped out of her trance, but walked back to the base with me with noticeably heavier steps while displaying a somewhat dejected expression. Lord Corinth went out to hunt today as well. I've become able to engage in some simple conversations with Lord Corinth lately. I quite enjoyed talking with him. Lord Corinth is really amazing. He is quick to memorize every word and phrase and only needs to hear them once. It's fun to teach him because he's such a quick learner. His proficiency in my language increases at an impressive and almost unbelievable rate. It's been about 9 days since we've come to this makeshift base. I've become able to walk on my own by dragging my injured foot on the ground. Lord Corinth took my greaves out from his bag and gave them back to me. Somehow, I felt really happy. Lord Corinth is always so considerate towards me. However, I was also troubled about how exactly I would be able to repay his kindness. He asked me what I wanted to do after my foot healed yesterday. He made me decide if I wanted to resume our journey once my foot completely recovers, or wait until my hand gets healed as well. It seemed that if we resumed traveling, we would not be able to have meals like what we've been eating until now, so my hand's recovery would take more time. I didn't even need to think twice. I chose to stay and wait until my hand heals and my body completely recovers. I don't want to always be beholden to Lord Corinth's protection like when we were attacked by monsters some days ago. I want to be able to fight together with him, side by side. It was hard for me to have to always depend on Lord Corinth's care, but I've already made a vow to Goddess Ramina's. I swore to definitely repay this favor someday. Thus, I have to become even stronger. I practiced the sword forms Lord Corinth taught me after I collected firewood from the river's edge. Once my foot completely recovers, I'd be able to train more effectively. It seems Lord Corinth has come back. He brought a big boar with him. Welcome back, Lord Corinth. I'm back, Cleria. Just the act of exchanging greetings like this has made me feel greatly embarrassed. I've never welcomed anyone else back apart from my family. Also, I only noticed it when we started to have proper conversations, but Lord Corinth always uses my first name whenever he addresses me. Even in noble society, the only one allowed to call someone of the opposite sex by their first name apart from family was a person's fiancé. I don't think Lord Corinth meant anything more to his actions, but an embarrassing thing was an embarrassing thing. And while I was preoccupied with such thoughts, Cleria, it's Alan. Not. Okay. He told me straight to call him by his first name as well. I heard of this once from Fowl. It seemed that it was currently a trend for the men of lower nobility to ask a lady they fancy to call them by their first name as a subtle way of proposing their feelings. I understand that Lord Corinth didn't really mean something of the sort. It was probably just how things were in Lord Corinth's country. Alan, I meekly called out to him. Lord Corinth seemed glad and nodded back at me. Lord Corinth proceeded to butcher the big boar with the air of a professional chef. It never crossed my mind when I was in the capital, but I actually think I want to learn how to do something like this as well. Let me try to learn then. I'm looking forward to having some big boar meat again. When we went back to the base, we saw that the bonfire had already gone out. Not good. Lighting a fire was one of the few things I could help out with after all. I weaved my mana and used magic to reignite the bonfire. Lord Corinth seemed somewhat surprised by what I did. Cleria, what was that just now? I wonder what he means. I just used the fire spell to reignite the bonfire, that's all. Oh, maybe he was surprised about how short it took for me to cast my magic. Yes, I may not really look like it, but I'm actually quite an accomplished mage. I've even been told I'm already qualified to become a court magician. But the only system I was good at was fire magic though. I explained as such to Lord Corinth, and he seemed satisfied with my answer. Now it's time for Lord Corinth's cooking. I'm going to eat my fill today as well. Lord Corinth became quite proficient in my language before long. We began to converse with each other more and more, so I took an opportunity to ask what was on my mind for the past few days. How exactly did my arm and leg get healed? According to Lord Corinth, he summoned tiny spiritual beings invisible to the naked eye which were residing inside of him and made them enter my body as well. He then asked them to heal me. In all honesty, if I had heard such an absurd thing from someone other than Lord Corinth, I would most likely hold some doubts against them. Of course, I properly believed in the existence of goddess Rumina's spirit familiars. But something like housing spirits in one's body truly went against common sense. Despite this, I still believed in Lord Corinth. A great and noble person like him could not possibly lack the favor of goddess Rumina's. My recovering limbs were proof enough that he really could converse with and implore the spirits to hear his wishes. In the first place, only divine power could possibly do something like the restoration of severed limbs. Lord Corinth seemed to notice some apprehension from my expression. He suddenly took out his knife and cut his arm. His action was so quick that I didn't even have the chance to stop him. However, only 1 or 2 drops of blood flowed out from the wound, and it healed at an astonishing rate, visible to the naked eye. After a few moments, there wasn't even a scratch to be seen. This was totally impossible even with the use of high-order healing magic. Yes, this couldn't possibly be anything like healing magic. Amazing. He really was favored by the goddess and her spirits. Did I also receive divine favor through Lord Corinth? I didn't doubt him in the slightest at this point, but I somehow wanted to try it for myself. I took the knife and cut myself in the same way. Lord Corinth didn't move to stop me. I felt some pain for an instant, but it went away just as fast as it came. My wound also immediately closed up. How truly amazing. Ooh! I have also received the grace of the spirits. I trembled in excitement. Lord Corinth then asked me what I wanted to do with the spirits once my limbs healed. He could either request them to leave me or make them continue to reside in me. I chose to have them stay inside me. This power was necessary for me in the future. There would probably be quite a lot of people who would even sell away their souls to gain such power. Lord Corinth just nodded in agreement, as if it was just a simple matter. I once again owe another great favor to Lord Corinth. Finally, after a few more days, my foot became completely restored. It was great to be able to walk on 2 whole feet again. According to Lord Corinth, I need to go on frequent walks in order to get used to my newly regrown foot. It certainly did feel quite stiff. It would pose a problem when we resume traveling. I took a walk along the riverside with Lord Corinth. After we spent a while walking along, Lord Corinth asked me something. Hey Cleria, can you do other stuff apart from the thing you used to light up the bonfire last time? The way he said it was a little strange, but I understood what he meant. He seems to be asking me if I could use spells other than fire. I guess he wanted to confirm what magic spells I could use. Of course, I'd gladly oblige. I didn't want Lord Corinth to think I couldn't cast other spells apart from fire, after all. Let me cast a fireball then. I successfully cast it after 15 seconds or so. It was a relatively fast casting time. Lord Corinth seemed Surprised. I want to show him even more magic spells, so I cast Flame Arrow next. I took 30 seconds to cast it, which was my best time thus far. I hope I managed to impress Lord Corinth with it. I cast Firewall as well, but I couldn't maintain it for long. Lord Corinth also seemed surprised by the Firewall spell. I told him these were all the fire system spells I knew. He then asked if I could cast any other types of magic. I showed him water magic. Lord Corinth seemed the most surprised and impressed when I cast a water spell. How embarrassing. A lot of people could cast a basic water spell after all, and I think me casting it didn't warrant such a reaction. After that, Lord Corinth asked if the water I produced was drinkable. How strange. Even little children knew of the fact that water produced by spells was drinkable. I answered yes to him, of course. Maybe Lord Corinth wasn't really all that familiar with magic. Can you also use magic, Alan? I'm still not used to calling him by his first name. It really made me feel utterly embarrassed. He answered with actions instead of words. He held his hand up towards the river. So fast. He didn't even take 10 seconds to cast a fireball. And he didn't even utter a spell word. I've once heard that extremely talented individuals can actually cast magic spells without using words and with their eyes open. He paused in thought for a while, and when he brought his hand up again, he cast 3 simultaneous fireballs. What did he just do? Considering the process of magic activation, something like simultaneous casting was supposed to be impossible. While I was stunned to silence, Lord Corinth held his hand up again. He soon released another fireball. How fast? The fireball exploded when it hit the river water. After a loud bang, the water gushed up and splashed down towards Lord Corinth and me, utterly soaking us. Lord Corinth displayed a guilty expression, and wryly grinned. Was that perhaps the legendary explosion spell? I've only ever heard of it being mentioned, and have not witnessed the real thing until now. This was the ability of one favored by God. Such power. I became frozen stiff from shock for a few moments. Looks like Lord Corinth's magic display was over, and he turned to go back to the base. I ran after Lord Corinth in a fluster, wanting to ask him about that last fire spell. However, Lord Corinth simply dodged my inquiries with half-hearted replies. 2. After we got back near the vicinity of the base, I asked Cleria to explain the concept of magic in more detail. There were a total of 5 magic systems: fire magic, water magic, wind magic, earth magic, and light magic. But apparently, Cleria couldn't use any wind, earth, or light magic spells. I wonder why. Does it depend on talent or something? Earlier, I just formed an image and managed to successfully execute some spells. Should I be considered as someone who has some talent for this stuff then? Looks like I had plenty to look into in the future. We promptly plopped down outside the base. There's still some more time before dinner. Cleria seemed to want to practice magic, but I asked her to continue with her foot rehab exercises near me so I can observe her progress instead. She seemed to hesitate for a bit, but eventually relented and started walking back and forth about 5 meters in front of me. Oh well. Guess that works too. Well, discovering exactly similar energy forms on 2 different planets countless light years away from each other seemed more far-fetched actually. We used the sensor settings that were employed during the Salza 2 survey mission earlier. As a result, we were able to obtain a detailed comparison. According to the data, the energy density in our current environment is 1,000 times higher than the readings recorded on Salza 2. What's with that scale? 1,000 times was quite an impressive number. After a few moments, my surroundings suddenly changed in appearance. I saw a vast, dark space with countless tiny motes of light floating around. Whoa! How beautiful! My body outline also had a large number of sparkling lights within it. They somehow resembled a field of stars out in space. The area around my chest was shining brightly, akin to a nebula, and was very dazzling. So these motes of light represent that mysterious energy form, huh? How amazing! These energy nodes seem to attract each other and have a tendency to move towards a point of higher density. They seem to gather easily on the central part of a human's chest area in particular. Well, now that I got a better look at them, the light particles near me seem to be gradually gathering towards me at a gradual rate. They were heading towards the dense mass of energy in the center of my chest. So the energy outside gradually accumulates inside one's body automatically, huh? So this energy is the source of magic. I see. Seems simple enough. Let's go with that then. So it seems even if I consume a certain amount of magicless, my reserves would be automatically replenished. I didn't plan to use up a lot in one go, but the replenishment rate seemed really slow, so running out may be a possibility. Looks like I have to ask an expert in the field. I turned towards Cleria and saw her chest also shining like a bright nebula. Cleria seemed happy that I called out to her and cheerfully approached me. Cleria, how many times can you cast Fireball continuously? I immediately inquired. Her answer was about more than 20, but less than 30. The number was unexpectedly little. What happens when you try to cast more than 30? She'd faint, apparently. In other words, she'll lose consciousness. It's great that there's no danger of death, though. How long would it take for you to recover? She'd recover and would regain her ability to cast spells after about a day's worth of rest, apparently. Cleria then went back to shuffling back and forth. But this time, she stayed 2 meters behind me. It was a bit distracting, to be honest. But I might have some questions for her again, so this works out fine. Why would one lose consciousness from magical depletion? Yep, guess you also have no idea, huh? To summarize what I've managed to learn so far, the human body has the capability to attract magicless in the atmosphere for some reason, and utilizing these magicless allows people to cast magic spells. Once depleted, a day's rest would allow one to replenish the lost magicless in order to keep casting spells. I didn't know the exact reason why, but it seems I've become capable of utilizing these magicless to cast magic as well. This change didn't make any sense, scientifically speaking. Basing on the laws of physics, something like energy turning into water was nothing short of impossible. Guess that's an expected answer. I'm looking forward to researching this stuff even more now. Next, I'll have to get used to using magic as one of my means of combat. One can't fully make use of an unfamiliar weapon after all. Popped up on the corner of a virtual window. I released a fireball towards the shore on the other side of the river. The fireball flew parallel to the water surface for about 30 meters, but then suddenly stalled and dropped straight down. All in all, it reached to about 40 meters. The flame plopped into the water and fizzled out soon after. So this spell's effective range is about 30 meters. Next, let's test its overall power. I looked around and found a piece of driftwood nearby. I approached it until I was about 20 meters away and launched a fireball at it. The fireball flew out and hit the driftwood. The magic-induced flame clung onto the driftwood like regular fire. It'll eventually go out after some time if you left it alone, but you would most likely suffer some burns if you ate one of these things head-on. Right then. Let's try practicing some water magic for a change. I imagined water being released from the palm of my hand. Water strongly gushed out from my palm. The fire clinging onto the driftwood was extinguished after less than 10 seconds. This magic's really convenient. It looked a bit different from what Cleria showed me earlier, but it should be fine. Oh yeah, I forgot to confirm an important point. Cleria said she could fire off more than 20, but less than 30. I had nearly double that amount. Was something different between Cleria and me? I then decided to see what happens if I nearly deplete my magical reserves. Oh, and one other thing. The indicator displayed on the virtual window disappeared. Another point to research on. But I guess 5% is within the acceptable range. The number next to the icon increased to 35. That feels a bit weird. I can't describe it well, but it's sort of like having a slight fever, but restricted to the chest area. Let's try launching 5 in succession first. I pointed my open palm towards the river. I imagined the fireballs rapid firing out one after the other. 5 continuous fireball shots. They flew into the river consecutively. They seemed much faster compared to the 3 shots I made earlier today. Well, I can't really imagine a situation where I'd be required to fire off fireballs at this speed consecutively, so this experiment seemed a bit pointless. Now that I think about it, was it really necessary to hold out one's hand during the casting process? I ended up doing so because it's the way Cleria did it, but I don't really think such an action was really necessary, depending on the type of image in your mind. I have these things called the aiming and multi-lock system, which are deployed on a virtual nanoprojected window, and I think using these would be more efficient. Let's try it then. There were some huge stones near the river shallows in the distance. I had aimed at one using the virtual HUD display. I imagined a fireball appearing 20 meters away from my body while I kept my hands down. Fireball launch. Oh. Looks like it went well. I was more familiar with this method after all. I've drilled on this type of maneuver thousands of times in the past. I'll go with this style from now on. I locked onto all 4 of the large stones on the river shallows. Fireball, 4 shots. Each fireball hit its intended target. Great. When I was casting stuff while holding out my arm, I always used the direction I was pointing towards as the basis for aiming. But if I use the aiming system instead, the fireballs would hit the intended targets without me trying to direct their aim myself. It was pretty convenient. Oh yeah. Let's try it with the flame arrow spell Cleria showed me earlier. In order to determine their maximum range, I moved to about 50 meters away from the huge rocks, and cast the spell from there. 3 arrows of flame materialized and shot out with speeds comparable to those of real arrows. Flame arrows, launch. 3 flaming arrows appeared about 1 meter away from my body and shot towards the targets. They seemed to dip down a little before hitting the targets. Okay, so their range is a bit shorter than 50 meters then. But they were better compared to fireballs. They were faster and had a longer range. I looked at the virtual HUD and saw on the corner. So 1 arrow costs 5 fireballs, huh? Well, considering their improved effectiveness, I guess that's reasonable. When I thought about how I should use the remaining 20 charges, I suddenly caught a black shadow approaching from downstream. It was flying. I zoomed in on the figure. That's a blackbird. It was something I sought out for the past few days to no avail. Because Cleria didn't know its name, I just decided to call it Blackbird. It's quite delicious, but also quite rare. I've only ever hunted 2 of these buggers. How the heck does it even fly with that sort of roly-poly figure? It was still about 400 meters away, and was flying towards this direction. But if it notices me, I bet it'd run away at once. Can I shoot it down with magic? My maximum range was a bit short of 50 meters. I'll bring it down with 4 consecutive flame arrow spells, with a total of 12 arrows. I looked towards Cleria and saw her spacing out again. This girl does that from time to time. Is she okay? She then squatted down and pointed her hand towards the blackbird in the distance. I told Cleria I'd attack it with flame arrow spells. She closed her eyes and started visualizing after she heard my intention. So she intends to help out. I intended to bring it down myself, but the help's welcome nonetheless. It's already close to 200 meters from us. When would it notice our presence? 150. 100. 75. 50. It finally noticed us. The blackbird reversed its course back to the forest in a fluster. I immediately launched a barrage of 2 flame arrow spells. I fired off a volley to cut off its path of retreat. The blackbird frantically flapped its wings to evade, and changed its course once again. The timing was perfect, but Cleria was still visualizing her spell. I fired off another barrage to block it. Finally, Cleria opened her eyes and fired off her own flame arrow spell. The aim was spot on. The blackbird's escape routes were sealed by my continuous flame arrow barrage, and Cleria's spell sealed the deal. 1 arrow struck the pudgy fowl dead on. The blackbird got severely injured and fell down. Cleria was delighted. She kept jumping up and down in elation and spoke excitedly. I only managed to understand half of what she was saying, but it seems it was the first time she brought something like that down with magic. When I attempted to stand up, I suddenly felt a bout of dizziness overcome me. I see. So this is the effect of magical exhaustion. I didn't want to faint, so I'm not going to use any more magic today. I walked towards the spot where the blackbird fell and found it writhing weakly. I quickly cut its neck and drained its blood. Cleria kept dithering excitedly as she watched me work. It seems she just can't contain her happiness. Just as well. I only managed to hunt 1 rabbit today anyway. Considering Cleria's huge appetite, it was quite lacking. It's already near evening, So let's go ahead and have some dinner. I kept wondering about why I was called for as I walked along the corridor leading to the king's private chambers. The king usually spends his time in his office at this hour, so him being in his private chambers is quite a rare occurrence. I also often met my esteemed father during dinner time anyway. Was the matter he summoned me for today unsuitable to be discussed at such a time? I finally arrived in front of the king's private chambers. I nodded towards the two royal guard knights, Darshim and Carrot. Both of them have served our family ever since I was a child, so I was quite familiar with them. Darshim knocked on the door, opened it a little and declared, "Her Highness, the princess has arrived. Come in." I entered the room and was surprised to see my brother inside as well. "I have heard your summons and have come, Lord Father," I greeted. "Oh, Cleria. I'm sorry for calling you over all of a sudden. It's been a while, Cleria." "It certainly has been quite a while since I last met my brother, 3 months, I believe." "It really has been a while, dear brother." My brother seemed so dependable as always. He also doted on me a lot. I'm glad I got to see him again after so long. "Well then, Cleria, this is a bit abrupt, but I'm thinking of sending you out for an inspection. Tour around our kingdom." I wonder what Lord Father means by this. It seems my dear brother has just come back from an inspection tour himself. It won't be considered odd if I was sent out as well, but wouldn't it be better for the timing for the tours to be spaced a bit apart? I do not have any qualms about it, Lord Father, but is there a reason for sending me out so soon? It would be better if we told her of the matter, Lord Father. Cleria isn't a child anymore after all. Yes, you're right. Go ahead and tell her our concerns, Alf. You're aware that I have just come from an inspection visit to our southern and western domains, aren't you, Cleria? Yes, of course, brother. The southern and western domains were where most nobles from the former Aloys kingdom resided and governed. The Aloys kingdom was a country that was annexed by Starvik kingdom 162 years prior. As a condition for annexation, the noble houses of Aloys kingdom were granted rights to manage most of the southern and western territories. However, the south and west were also regions where a lot of problems occurred due to friction between the former Aloysian nobles and the nobility of Starvikian descent, because of their differing outlooks and bearings. According to my brother, he visited several major towns and cities in the southern and western domains and found some of the actions made by the local nobility somewhat worrying. There was no concrete evidence that they were up to no good. However, some subtle hints, like the local nobility's suspiciously lukewarm attitudes towards his delegation, or the number of conscripted soldiers being far greater than what was reported to the crown, proved to be enough causes for concern. The southern and western domains can't possibly be contemplating rebellion. No, Cleria. Both father and I don't think the situation has come to that point quite yet. But their actions are still worrying enough. But Lord Father has done his utmost to forge an amicable relationship with the southern and western nobility. In fact, as part of the peace process and a gesture of trust, mass recruitment of personnel from the noble houses of the South and West was implemented 5 years ago. Both the military minister in charge of the army and the finance minister in charge of the kingdoms. Economic affairs had men hailing from those regions appointed to various positions of import. Both men were excellent individuals who each proposed groundbreaking reforms which proved quite astonishing to their peers. However, it's also true that their act of recruiting most of their vassals from those who hail from the southern and western domains raised more than a few eyebrows and posed some concern. Furthermore, even though they haven't managed to birth any children for them yet, both men received southern noblewomen as their concubines. I am well aware of your concerns. But as Alf said earlier, we don't think it would lead to a full-blown conflict just yet. Given these circumstances, I want you to visit the eastern and northern territories instead. As for me, I can't leave the capital for the time being because I need to help Father deal with these matters. I see. If the situation in the south and west was really suspicious as they said, it's only natural for me to be sent to the eastern and northern domains instead. The east and north are governed by full-blooded Starvikian noble houses. In case the southern and western domains really do stage a revolt, I could rally the eastern and northern lords to oppose them. This seemed to be an important undertaking. I have to do my utmost. Lord Father, this Cleria fully accepts your appointment to visit the eastern and western domains. Afterward, my older brother briefed me about the things I needed to take note of and the actions I needed to take. 2. Alf gazed at Cleria's receding back as she left the king's private room. He didn't want to burden Cleria with any needless preconceptions, so he opted not to mention the matter, but not all of the southern and western domains were governed by former Aloysian nobility. Actually, 40% of the noble houses in the south and west were full-blooded Starvikians. He didn't tell her that even these noble houses seemed suspicious as well. It would be best if nothing of the sort happened to Cleria during her inspections. Alf then busied himself together with his father to think of ways to improve the current volatile state of affairs. 2. Fal, who was waiting outside, rushed up to me as soon as I went out of the king's private room. What did the king need you for, Cleria-sama? He told me to head to the eastern and western territories for an inspection visit. Would you like to accompany me? Of course, Cleria-sama. Afterward, I went ahead with the preparations for traveling. I had just come of age the previous year, so this was my first time heading out for a royal inspection. There were a lot of things I was not familiar with. And thus, as commanded by the king, we were finally set for departure after 3 days. I bid farewell to my father, brother, and mother. Mother must have heard something from father regarding my trip, so she told me to always remain vigilant during the journey. My brother accompanied me partway in order to see me off. I'm so happy he did so. Do be careful during your travels, Cleria. Perform your royal duties to the best of your ability. Of course, dear brother. I shall be going then. Accompanying me on my travels were several Imperial Guard knights and their squires. Even Sir Antes, captain of the Royal Guards, was present. Furthermore, most of the knights were those who have served me since I was young. It was a well-known fact that father doted on me far too much in the royal palace, but I do think it was time for me to become a little bit more independent from now on. We finally left the royal capital, home to 500,000 Starvikian citizens, and started our journey. The royal inspection proceeded relatively smoothly. However, I felt a sense of unease when I went around several cities. Our delegation was warmly welcomed by the high-ranking nobles, but the barons and the rest of the lower-ranking nobles seemed to be behaving strangely towards us. They did receive us properly, but it felt like they were acting unusually reserved for some reason. Were their attitudes simply due to the difference in status between us? I asked Val about my observations, but she told me she hasn't noticed anything of the sort. The royal inspection continued as planned, until we finally reached the last leg of our travels. 3 months have passed since we've departed from the royal capital. We arrived at the earldom of the Ludwig house, which my mother was formerly a part of. The current earl is my mother's older brother. We were of course eagerly received by them. The evening after our arrival, the door of my room suddenly received a knock. Val, who was staying in an adjacent anteroom, swiftly got up and went to my side. "Who's there?" "It's Darshim, Your Highness. A servant of this house came, saying that the Earl requests to meet you with due haste, my princess." I did try to refuse him, but he insisted. If that's the case, then it can't be helped. We were staying at the Earl's castle to begin with. Complying with this request would just be appropriate. I looked towards Val and nodded in agreement. "Please wait for a moment," Val called out. I then proceeded to make myself more presentable. 2. I was led into a room where I found the Earl along with a nobleman who seemed to be his aide. "I am truly sorry to have requested your presence at this ungodly hour, royal princess." The Earl started. "It's all right. More importantly, what seems to be the matter?" "We've just received word from the capital. A rebellion has broken out." I jerked in surprise after hearing the sudden grave news and endured the urge to cry out. "How large is the scale?" "I cannot say for certain, but I estimate the rebel elements to include 60 to 70% of the southern and western noble houses, 20 to 30% of the eastern and northern nobles, and 60% of the military." I swiftly calculated the numbers mentioned. So it's more than half of the nobility and the army. "Which side are you on, your lordship?" After hearing my question, Val moved her hand to her sword's hilt, ready to draw it at a moment's notice. "Your Highness. No, my dear niece Cleria, do not ask me such a thing. Our Ludwig house has sworn its unwavering loyalty to the Starvine royal house instead of the Starvik kingdom, since its inception 300 years ago. Your misgivings are misplaced." "I'm sorry, uncle. I was just too upset. Please forgive me." "Yes, it would not be good if I was unable to properly determine friend from foe and mistrust my closest allies. If he were against us, my uncle would not have informed me of the rebellion in the first place." I then asked my uncle for the details of the rebellion. "It all began 20 days ago, when my father summoned the military minister Lord Aloys under the pretense of wanting to discuss something with him, which he promptly ignored. They then attempted to reach out to the military officials staying near the royal palace to inquire about the matter, but found that they were no longer able to contact them as well. 2 days after the summons, Lord Aloys rallied his soldiers and raised the flag of rebellion. A good portion of the nobility matched their timing and participated as well. The royal capital ended up being sealed off, and the royal palace was besieged by the army and fell 3 days after. What about my father? My mother and brother? My uncle grimly shook his head. They were all executed on the square in front of the royal castle. They were charged with high treason for allegedly selling out the kingdom to the neighboring holy state of Eram. What? How utterly ridiculous. The holy state of Aram was a neighboring country, which raided our borders from time to time. I know. I'm sure no one, friend or foe alike, actually believe in such a flimsy accusation. Coup. We need to recapture the royal capital immediately. Your Highness, it would be best if you first gather the forces of the east and north under your name in order to properly oppose the rebels. It certainly is as my uncle says. Our enemies are composed of nobles and a considerable part of the army. They won't be felled by half-hearted forces. I'm very sorry, uncle. I was too hasty and blood just rushed to the top of my head. Do not worry, princess. I understand your feelings. My esteemed king and my cute little sister were both humiliated and butchered under their hands. I'll absolutely make them pay the price. My uncle's aura suddenly turned murderous. I then proceeded to write letters all morning which were to be delivered to the nearby noble houses. Their content was a call to arms following the events in the royal capital. Over 200 knights were sent out to deliver my letters to the noble houses of the eastern and northern domains. But I noticed something strange after the third day since sending out the messengers. There was no response up until now. At the very least, the lords from the territories near the earldom should have given us a reply already. None of the knights entrusted with delivering the letters came back as well. An unpleasant premonition comes over me. Finally, on the morning of the fourth day, a noble leading his private forces arrived in the earldom. Judging from the flag they were flying, it was the forces of Baron Arseny, who uncle regards as his right-hand man. I welcomed the Baron together with my uncle. Your Royal Highness. You were safe. Thank the goddess Raminas. It has been a long time, Baron. However, what do you mean? I looked at the Baron quizzically. My uncle and his aides' faces suddenly paled. Yes, well. I did not know that your Highness actually came here. That can't be. Did you not receive my letter? No, I have never received any sort of letter from your Highness. I just learned about the rebellion in the capital 2 days ago, and asked the Ludwig house for instructions. But I never received a response. That's why I came here directly. Damnation. So those messengers really were intercepted. My uncle was horrified. I was finally able to grasp what was happening. All of the messengers never reached their intended destinations. Your Highness, perhaps they have been planning this rebellion for years. They are far too prepared. What happened to the messengers? They may have all been killed already. The rebels may have stationed groups of soldiers on the main roads. They must have intercepted the messengers and got rid of them since the enemies outnumber them. Conversely, if we assemble a large enough number of troops, they would not be able to lay siege to them as easily. We should dispatch a sufficient number of scouts immediately. My goddess! How frighteningly thorough! The scout troops were soon assembled along with troops tasked to eliminate the enemy soldiers stationed on the main roads. The troops set out. This deployment lasted for a couple of days. We finally grasped a rough handle of the situation due to the soldiers' efforts. The enemy should be comprised of 40,000 soldiers, a majority of which came from the military. The private troops of the southern and western nobles were mixed in as well. They were currently moving against the noble houses who are still putting up a resistance, sieging their castles. They hold their entire territories hostage while proposing for the ruling nobles to surrender and come to the royal capital with their families, on the condition that they will relinquish their rights to their lands and hand that responsibility to the rebels. The enemy forces have already invaded deeply into the eastern and northern domains, and even if the remaining nobles loyal to the royal family tried to muster their forces and gather up, there's a good chance they would be intercepted along the way and eliminated one by one. We continued to receive these kinds of grievous news. I took in all these reports while feeling dumbfounded. At this rate, even if we do somehow manage to gather some forces, it won't number more than 5,000 men. While I was ruminating our dismal situation, Uncle addressed me. We just received word that the castle of Count David has fallen. The enemy's main force shall be coming here in half a day's time. I have long prepared myself for such an outcome. I understand. We shall meet the enemy head-on, and show them the strength of our resolve. Spoken like a true Starvine. Your courage is most admirable. However, I would want your Highness to escape from here if possible. Do not say such absurd things. Do you want me to live on in shame, Uncle? You would not be living in disgrace, Your Highness. I want you to go to the Belter Kingdom. Belter Kingdom. It was a neighboring country, however, one needs to cross the wild lands in order to reach it. I do not know much about Belter Kingdom. But Irina-sama, the little sister of your grandmother Arika-sama, had married over to that kingdom as queen. In other words, the Belter Kingdom's current king, Amodo-sama, is Cleary-sama's second cousin. Do you want me to seek aid from the Belter Kingdom? Precisely. But I believe they would not be able to make it in time to quell this rebellion if they do decide to lend aid. And even if you appeal to them personally, Princess, the possibility of the Belter Kingdom sending us aid is still quite low. That's true. Surely if the situation was reversed and it was the Belter Kingdom who is asking for aid, Starvik Kingdom will also hesitate in sending subjects who could possibly die in foreign soil. Even so, we want to preserve an ember of hope. Even if this kingdom is shattered, we still hope that it can be rebuilt once more and rise from the ashes. If so, then please help me, Uncle. Let us revive this kingdom together. No, I am a proud vassal of the Starvine royal house. Please allow me to make a stand here. If you surrender. My uncle immediately cut me off. Your Highness, considering the relationship between us and the Starvine royal house, my life will definitely not be spared. And even if I do manage to survive after surrendering, all that awaits next is the abolishment of the Ludwig house. I would rather choose to make a final stand and keep my pride instead of bowing in defeat without struggling. Even if I and my entourage of royal guards stayed and fought here, our meager numbers would not be able to change the inevitable outcome. Then would it truly be better to preserve an ember of hope as my uncle wishes? My uncle then knelt down and implored me. Your Royal Highness, if I may be so bold as to request one final thing of you. Speak. Your Highness also has the blood of the Ludwig house flowing through your veins. Considering our 300 years of unwavering service and loyalty to the Starvine Royal House, I beseech you to revive the Ludwig house one day. I have no reason to refuse such a request. I understand. I will definitely revive the Ludwig house without fail. I swear this upon the name of the goddess Raminas. I activated my mana and swore upon the name of the goddess. My body emitted a soft glow as proof of the vow. Waha! I am most grateful, Your Highness. Thus, my escape was decided. We immediately began preparations for departure. We have prepared 8 carriage groups for this occasion, equal to the number of roads leading out of our lands. Your Royal Highness will be among these 8 groups along with your Royal Guard. Each individual carriage has soldiers assigned to them to serve as escorts as well. All carriages will depart at the same time, each heading out to a different road leading out of the territory. Of course, none of the soldiers are told exactly which carriage Princess shall be riding in. They shall be heading to the Cecilio and Belter kingdoms respectively. However, the exact way towards the Belter kingdom is known only by the local hunters. We surmise that the enemy would most likely judge that you will be heading for the Cecilio kingdom. It is only a short distance away after all. Each carriage shall also be accompanied by scouts and rear troops. Despite the ongoing rebellion, we don't think that enemy troops would be stationed on the border roads leading out of the kingdom. The rebel forces have most likely already entered our lands, but they won't be able to come in pursuit of you effectively if each carriage group heads out to 8 different directions at the same time. The scouts and rear units are added insurance. I see. The arrangements seem perfect so far. The time for departure finally arrived. Only Uncle and his aide saw us off. Here, Your Highness. These were entrusted by the king to be given to you before the royal palace fell. I apologize for handing them over only now, my uncle said as he handed something to me. When I took a look, I saw 3 pieces of paper with words written on them. The first one said, Cleria, I'm so sorry, in my father's handwriting. The second one was my mother's, which said, I wish for your happiness, my dear Cleria. The last one was my brother's. It said, I entrust the Starvine royal house to you. All of them seemed to have been hastily written out. I forcefully held back my tears. Goodbye, uncle. Go, child. Goddess Ruminas, I beseech thee. Please bless Cleria on this journey and keep her safe. 7 days have passed since Cleria's foot got completely restored. Her arm has also nearly healed up as well, and all that remains to be regenerated are her fingertips. It should be fully restored by tomorrow. After discussing with her, both of us decided to finally leave this makeshift base tomorrow. Yep, my language proficiency has improved to the point where I can talk with Cleria normally. There are still some words I'm unfamiliar with, but I have no problems with the vocabulary often used in daily conversations. Cleria even said my pronunciation was impeccable. I'd like to gather more data by talking to people other than Cleria, but that would have to wait for the time being. I asked her about the reason why she was being chased the moment I became able to converse normally. After pausing to think for a bit, Cleria requested that I give her some more time before she tells me the reason, and assured me she would divulge it when she's good and ready. It seems her circumstances really were complicated. I've stayed with Cleria for quite a bit now, and I really do think she isn't someone who would commit wrongdoings. She's no criminal, that's for sure. So I don't really mind if she doesn't want to talk about her circumstances. As for the number of her pursuers, she told me they definitely wouldn't be just a few, but their numbers won't exceed 100. But there's also a chance they won't be able to catch up. That's rather vague. So is it all right to expect their numbers to be about 50 men strong? I think I'd be able to deal with that amount of targets with my rifle somehow. But those kinds of numbers still warrant utmost caution. And I'm still uncertain if it would be fine to shoot first and ask questions later if and when we do manage to encounter them. I'm still considering it as of now. It's also been 7 days since I began learning magic, but my research hasn't progressed at all. Well, not exactly. It's progressing in some areas, but I haven't really developed any new applications of fire spells and the like. This is because of something I requested Nanum to prioritize developing. I wanted to produce the so-called multisensor, a standard piece of equipment of the Galactic Army Corps. As its name implies, it is able to detect anything within scanning range terrain, the internal layout of buildings, the presence or absence of living life forms and the like. Even if you're not wearing active camouflage, you'd never be taken by surprise if you have a multisensor handy. When I first came to this planet, the thing I wanted first was a multisensor. I was honestly amazed at the wide applications of magic in this planet, and asked Nanum if it could develop a magical version of a multisensor. Due to that, there was no point in wasting magicless with aimless magic experiments. However, I was able to learn more about magicless as a result. Every living creature on this planet is able to contain magicless within their bodies, whether it's something as large as a big boar or as small as a tiny insect. Even plants have magicless inside them. It's a rather surprising discovery, but the amounts of magicless present in a majority of creatures aren't enough to construct a simple fireball spell. Living things attract magicless, and the magicless gradually builds up inside of them. However, the amount of magicless will not continue to increase indefinitely. Once a certain amount gathers inside of a creature's body, the inflow of magicless comes to a halt and the surplus magicless get expelled back outside. I don't know the exact cause of this phenomenon. It seems the amount of magicless an organism is able to contain greatly differs from species to species. In other words, creatures of the same species are able to contain the exact same amount of magicless inside them. As an example, Cleria and I have the same magical count inside each of us. The reason for the difference between the numbers of fireballs I and Cleria are able to cast stems from the efficiency of magical use. According to Cleria, if one is able to improve their rate of magical consumption, the number of times they can cast spells would increase accordingly. I just rely on Nanum for these sorts of things, so it's possible I won't be able to improve this aspect anymore. I and Nanum prioritized collecting this sort of data every day, because it would enable us to determine what kinds of life forms are present in an area from long range, by determining the amount of magicless contained within them and creating a corresponding database. We've also discovered that magicless have properties similar to normal particles and energy waves to some extent. They were particle ilk, but also had properties like reflection, interference, and diffraction. Upon discovering this fact, we were able to determine that it was possible to release raw magicless outside of the body instead of spells. The magicless could be released outside of the body in the form of waves. There's no noticeable effect if you only release a small concentration of waves out, but if you increase the output, the magical waves get reflected back whenever they hit another mass concentration of magicless. Utilizing this characteristic, we were able to develop a radar-like function using magicless. The detection range depends on the intensity of the output of magicless. If a strong wave is released, a wide range of information can be acquired. Unexpectedly, Cleria was able to notice when I released a magical pulse as part of my ongoing experiments. When Nanam directed me to release a high-output wave, she came over and told me she felt I emitted some magic power, and asked me what I was up to. It looks like the people of this planet call the movement of magicless as magic power. I was told one would be able to sense the buildup of magic power before a spell gets released, but somehow, I wasn't able to feel a thing. Would I be able to do so with time? It seems Cleria was told that her talent for detecting magic power is several times greater than most people, according to an experienced mage she knew. After knowing this, I immediately enlisted Cleria's help with my experiments. It seems whenever I use this form of scanning magic, there's a danger of the other party becoming aware of my presence and position. I'd like to be able to obtain information unilaterally if possible. We later discovered that Cleria's ability to sense magic power was not only affected by the strength of the waves released, but also the total distance from the emission point. I sort of expected this kind of outcome. If that's the case, would it be better if I increased the range and intensity of the magical waves being released gradually instead of emitting something high output all at once? I managed to arrive at such a conclusion. For example, I'd first release a magical pulse weak enough for Cleria not to notice from 50 meters out. If I found nothing worth noting, I'd proceed to widen the range to 75 meters, 100 meters, and so on. Using this method, I'd minimize the risk of being noticed by the other party. If this method isn't effective, then I'll just have to improve it step by step. The nice thing about this scanning magic is that I can leave its activation entirely to Nanam. This is probably because I didn't need to focus on a concrete sort of image for it. Once it gets invoked, Nanam would automatically display the search results on a virtual display. It's roughly the same display method as the multisensor, so it's quite intuitive. The amount of magicless used up when using scanning magic is about equal to 1 fireball per 100 magical pulses. It's very cost-effective. It should prove quite useful from now on. In the end, we weren't able to quite recreate the functions of a multisensor, but the results were plenty satisfying enough. When I declared the completion of my scanning magic method to Cleria, who cooperated in its development, she first responded by staring at me with a wooden stare again. But she eventually snapped out of her stupor and immediately asked me to teach her the method. But why see? It's kinda impossible for others to use this method without the aid of a sensor able to accurately detect magicless and the information processing ability of Nanam. I somehow skirted around the issue by telling Cleria she had to improve her magic control more. And then the conversation somehow moved to her tagging along with me on today's hunt. I wonder why. As we've used up a lot of time doing magic experiments, it's already almost noon when we finished up. I decided to go hunting after we've had our lunch. Today's dishes include grilled fish and stir-fried big boar meat, the classic, but delicious menu selection. Guess it's time for a hunt. Yes. Let's depart immediately, Alan. Cleria seems quite eager to go hunting. At first, Cleria was still somewhat embarrassed whenever she addressed me by name, but she seems to have gradually become accustomed to it. I think she looks to be more relaxed about it compared to before. 2. My preferred hunting spot was about an hour's walk from the base. For some reason, this part of the mountain was rich in edible plant life and wild animals. I immediately had Nanam activate scanning magic while heading deeper into the mountains. Since I was relatively free until we reached the hunting grounds, I ended up teaching Cleria about the standard hand signs I learned back in the military academy. I didn't have a lot of chances to use them before because we just communicated through the Nanams in live combat situations, but I guess these would prove useful in the situation we're currently in. I managed to get a reaction from the scanning magic after walking for about 30 minutes. 3 o'clock. There's 2 of them, about 200 meters away. I immediately conveyed the info to Cleria via hand signs. She looks to have understood and displayed a serious expression. The other party is heading towards our general direction, but they're not moving in a straight line. They probably haven't noticed us yet. Judging from their movement patterns, I assumed them to be greyhounds. I've often encountered greyhounds during my hunts. I usually met 1 or 2 of these guys, 3 at most. I've always eliminated them whenever I encountered some. Dangerous pests like these need to be promptly exterminated. There's a good chance these guys are greyhounds. Would it be all right if I fight them instead, Alan? Oh, Cleria seems to be raring to have a go. Well, she has her armor on and all. Fine, let's see what she's got. I have my rifle with me, so I can just intervene if she ever gets into a bind. All right then, engage them in a composed manner. They'll be arriving at our position in about 30 seconds. Oh, and by the way, the method of time measurement in this planet is roughly the same as what's used all throughout the Empire. 1 minute is 60 seconds, 1 hour is 60 minutes, 1 day is 24 hours, and 1 year is 360 days. And similar to my home planet, they also divided the day into 12 hours each. The reason for it is unknown, but the method of time measurement on almost all planets, which house the human race, is roughly the same. The most promising theory is that the third party responsible for spreading humanity all throughout the cosmos somehow taught all of mankind how to count time. Other theories proved lacking. Furthermore, the period of revolution of each and every human-inhabited planet is around 365 days. Again, the most promising theory is that a third party selected planets that fulfilled this criterion and brought humanity to them. Cleria pulled out her sword and stared at it. It was a thin one-handed sword inlaid with detailed engravings. After about 10 seconds, the blade began to glow. Whoa! Can Cleria use Final Blade too? All right then, let's follow suit. I drew my sword and activated Final Blade as well, making the sword glow brightly. It seems the greyhounds finally noticed something. The glowing icons representing their position on the virtual map were approaching us rapidly. I thrust my palm out in front of Cleria and started counting down. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The greyhounds finally came into view. One of them headed straight towards me. I jumped off to the side as usual and swung down my sword. I lopped off the greyhound's head without any resistance. Cleria moved forward after I finished one off. The second greyhound froze on its tracks for a bit after witnessing the other one getting killed. It pounced toward Cleria instead, probably because it thought she was the easier one to bring down. Cleria swung her sword, but the creature somewhat avoided the slash. Too shallow. However, Cleria immediately followed up with another slash. This time, she was able to land a fatal hit. The greyhound's throat was split open and it thrashed about on the ground, but Cleria soon finished it off. Did she just use the basic combo I taught her? That looked quite good, by the way. Cleria also seemed elated at her performance. I put away my rifle. How did I do, Alan? I think you did pretty well. But I sensed a slight gap before you unleashed your next sword slash. It would be best if you practiced your ability to unleash successive follow-up attacks in case one slash fails to finish off your enemy. Corinth-style swordsmanship was a style that aims to overwhelm opponents with multiple successive attacks. It's better for Cleria to form a habit of performing continuous attacks and always thinking of the next move. Oops. It's not like Cleria's my disciple or anything. What am I getting all worked up for anyway? Cleria seemed convinced with my teachings and did a few practice swings. Alrighty then, since the pests have been exterminated, let's continue on. Aren't you going to extract their magic stones, Alan? Magic stone. What's that? What's a magic stone? Cleria seemed taken aback when I asked such a question. Magic stones are materials located inside the body of monsters. What's a monster? How can you differentiate between normal animals and monsters? A creature with a magic stone inside its body is a monster, and a creature without one is an animal. You serious? I got to learn something new again. Now that I think about it, I did find a round stone inside the body of one of those disgusting green creatures a while back. What do people do with these magic stones? Are these stones really useful or something? You can exchange them for ******* in any city or town. But the stones from these greyhounds aren't worth that much ****** though. An unfamiliar word appeared. It's been a while. I'll try updating my language database again. I played back Cleria's reply. You can exchange them for money in any city or town. But the stones from these greyhounds aren't worth that much money though. I was shocked silly. It wasn't due to the low value of greyhound magic stones, but about the fact that I completely forgot about the issue of money. It's the form of currency this planet is using. Money. I think I saw several small and round metallic plates while I was sorting out the luggage back then. Arg. Damn it. I failed to take note of it, because it wasn't a concept I was familiar with. I was even wondering why there were several pouches containing those things when I was sorting out the items. For thousands of years, the Empire has used electronic currency to process transactions. I was not familiar with this world's money, because what I'd used ever since I was a kid was e-currency. I'm in the same boat. I only managed to secure a few pieces. This is bad. Once we arrive at the city of Gatania where Cleria was heading, I bet we'd need some money. Should I go back to where the carriages were? Nah, it would be too risky. Cleria's pursuers might be hot on our trail after all. They might have already found the carriages too. Wait, maybe Cleria brought some with her. By the way, Cleria, do you have some money on you? I sound like a deadbeat good-for-nothing asking for some dough. No, I unfortunately do not. Looks like Cleria was broke too. In that case, our only choice right now is to earn some. If these magic stones can be exchanged for cash, then I'll have to gather a bunch of them right away. A cross-section of the Greyhound was displayed on a virtual window. The magic stone was located near its chest. I see. So magic stones get formed in the area of the body where magical concentration is the densest. Should I open the body up with a knife and thrust my hand inside? No, I ain't doing that. Might as well just split it open with my sword. I activated Final Blade again, and slashed the carcass, while being careful not to damage the magic stone in the process. I finally retrieved a magic stone, after poking around the carcass with my sword. It was a cloudy white ball about 3 centimeters in size. I secured both stones from the 2 carcasses. Cleria didn't know how much they were exactly worth for. Okay, let's resume the hunt. After walking around the hunting grounds for 20 minutes, I finally got a couple more reactions from the scanning magic. It was in the 2 o'clock direction and was stationary. It was located 200 meters away. I relayed this info to Cleria with hand signs and approached the target slowly and soundlessly. I somehow had a hunch about the identity of our stationary target. As expected, it's a blackbird. These guys almost never budge from the tree they were roosting on unless they sense danger. Cleria asked me to allow her to hunt it as well. I agreed and approached the target with her until we came within 40 meters. Cleria closed her eyes and prepared to cast a spell. Flame Arrow. Cleria released her spell. 3 flaming arrows hurtled towards the blackbird, but it was disturbed by Cleria's shout and was about to fly away to escape. 1 arrow managed to barely hit its wing and the pudgy avian fell down from the tree. I started running towards it along with Cleria. The flame arrow hit its wing, but the blackbird still seemed energetic. It couldn't fly, but it started running on the ground. It's fast. After I started chasing it around together with Cleria. The running speed of the bird was somewhat slower compared to humans, but it was using the trees as cover, making catching up to it a challenge. We split in 2 directions and pincered the damn bird. We chased it around for about 3 minutes, until Cleria finally managed to fatally wound it with her sword. Man, that was tiring. Cleria laughed heartily. It seems she really enjoyed the chase. Well, 2 people chasing a fat bird around did paint a silly picture. I laughed along with her. We returned to the base after I finished draining the bird's blood. Since this bird's liver was the vaunted white liver, it was, of course, served as sashimi. My hand and foot were finally healed. I clenched my left hand to test it out. It's been so long. I've often heard that you'll be able to appreciate things more once you've lost them. I understand that feeling now. I was really blessed to have gained my lost limbs back. I'm going to cherish my body more from now on. We're finally leaving for Gatania City in the Kingdom of Berta today. Although we've only stayed here for a brief period, I did feel a bit crestfallen at the thought of leaving this base. I moved my gaze towards Alan, who was busy preparing our breakfast. I have never felt as free in my entire life compared to these last few days. It's not like I have been forced to do things against my will, but as a member of royalty, I had to act in a manner befitting that of a princess. Be it my bearing, way of walking, the form of language I used to speak to our subjects, and even my thoughts, all had to be done in ways appropriate for a royal princess. As an example, I had to speak to people even older than my father in a way that denotes our stations as a royal and her subjects. My tutor, Viscount Terry's, impressed upon me the importance of the usage of proper speech forms. He once told me a story about a subject who was executed for the crime of disrespect due to him forgetting his place and talking in a rude manner towards royalty before the noble court. There were also accounts of nobles starting to use informal speech against royalty predating their acts of rebellion in the history of the kingdom, as well as those of other nations. The use of proper forms of speech when talking between a ruler and their subjects would denote their respective positions and serve as a reminder of how each should act. I was taught that this will also protect the interests of our subjects. Thus, I had been practicing what I have been taught ever since, but I somehow did not feel too comfortable talking in such a haughty-sounding way of speech. I wouldn't have minded much if I was really that excellent of an individual, but I know in my heart that I wasn't. Furthermore, almost all the people coming and going to the royal palace were talented people. Talking to such people like you were far above them was far too stressful, and the conversations I had with my family became more and more reserved as well. But it's different with Alan. He speaks really naturally and forgoes any stiff formalities. I ended up going along with his way speech before I knew it. I honestly couldn't get enough of this newfound sense of freedom. A few days ago, Alan asked me why I was being chased after. In order to give the reason, I would have to tell him all about myself and my circumstances. Alan is also a noble. I would probably have to address him in the tone I used as royalty once I told him of my background. Well, former royalty to be exact. I would like to immerse myself in this sense of freedom for a little bit longer. In truth, I would also really like to ask Alan about the country he's from and what position he holds there. But I have to tell him about myself first, so I couldn't do so until now. For the sake of our safety during our journey, I would have to speak of my circumstances soon. 2. All right then, we've had our meal, so it's about time to depart. The luggage we're taking with us is still a lot, but since there's magic, there's no need to bring water anymore, so the weight of the bags has been reduced a bit. The 3 PET bottles I brought with me to store drinking water were emptied out and folded to a fraction of their size. Yep, these PET bottles are the collapsible type which is handy for ease of storage. They are made out of a shape memory material that allows them to return to their original shape once you put in some liquid. The company which pioneered this technology and patented it became the #1 PET bottle manufacturer in the entire empire. I put some dried salmon fillets in the opened-up space after collapsing the PET bottles. I tried making them a few days back, and they turned out quite tasty. They are more suitable as snacks rather than something to have during meals and are a perfect accompaniment when drinking alcohol. But because they needed a large amount of salt, I only ended up making 2. Now that I think about it, I actually kinda want to drink some good alcohol right now. Will I be able to drink some once we arrive in the city? We walked back towards the riverside in order to trace it back to the main road. I think it took us about 3 hours of walking last time. I left keeping watch for potential threats to Nanam and proceeded to ask Cleria about a bunch of stuff to make good use of the time. I was woefully lacking in vocabulary before, so I couldn't ask even basic questions. For example, what is the name of this world? But that type of question would invite undue suspicion, so I had to refrain from posing anything of the sort. Even though I refrained from asking questions like that as much as possible, Cleria has been telling me about them of her own accord for the past few days. I'm thinking she may have misunderstood that I'm suffering from a sort of memory loss, or that I've come from a different continent. She's even told me a lot of basic stuff I wasn't familiar with but should be considered as common sense for any local. She doesn't hold anything back, even though some questions sound a bit silly. That's a good thing. Guess I'll ask her without reserve then. Cleria hasn't asked me where I'm from or what my occupation is even once. Of course, I wouldn't be able to answer me honestly if she did ask, but as I'm curious about her background, she may be curious about mine as well.